From his youth, Gilfus possessed a singular, unwavering ambition. He yearned to reach the absolute zenith of martial prowess. Yet, as time passed, reality dealt a crushing blow. Regardless of his grueling training, that summit remained tantalizingly out of reach. It seemed talent and destiny had chosen another champion. Still, his spirit refused to break. Driven by a profound sense of desperation, Gilfus chose to pursue an ancient legend, a tale of a sacred dragon that guarded a golden fruit, rumored to grant eternal life to anyone who consumed it. An arduous journey filled with perilous challenges finally led him to the hallowed ground, where the fruit grew. Before him, a golden radiance bathed the air, pulsing with an enchanting, divine energy. His body ached from the immense struggle, but his eyes remained fixed on the luminous fruit just within his grasp. He stood over the magnificent sacred dragon he had just vanquished, drawing a long, steadying breath. As a sliver of strength returned, he rose and slowly approached his prize. Deep within his soul, a conviction blossomed. This fruit would finally propel him to the pinnacle of power he had sought his entire life. Without a moment's hesitation, Gilfus plucked the golden treasure and took a bite. The instant it was down, a strange and potent energy surged through him. His very essence pulsed, his life force churned, and his whole being trembled as if being reforged by a celestial flame. In that moment, the world came to know him as Gilfus el Dragon, the mightiest man in the entire realm. But decades passed, and Gilfus's legendary strength began to fade with age. The body that was once a force of nature now lay frail upon his bed. His children and grandchildren gathered around him, their faces etched with sorrow. They all knew his journey was nearing its end. Gilliam, his eldest son, clutched his father's hand, fighting to remain strong. The great patriarch of the dragon family looked at them with a serene gaze, asking for no tears to be shed. Yet, a heavy gloom hung in the air. Since his wife's passing, a certain warmth had vanished from their home. Now, his own departure would carve an even deeper void. With a gentle voice, Gilfus urged them not to let sadness overwhelm their lives. A profound quiet settled over the room. His mind drifted back decades, to the day he'd eaten the golden fruit. Perhaps, he mused, one could never truly place faith in the myths of an ancient world. Even so, he considered himself lucky to have lived so long and to have watched his family grow. He assured himself that he had lived a full life, free of regret. But in the deepest chamber of his heart, a different truth lingered. The fire of his ambition to reach the true peak of martial arts had never been extinguished. If only he had been granted a little more time, he would have continued his relentless climb. That fervent wish remained with him until his final moment faded. Destiny, however, had another chapter written for him. In the stillness that should have been his final rest, Gilfus's eyes fluttered open once more. The world around him was utterly alien. The room was unfamiliar. His body felt impossibly light, and the entire setting was foreign. When he glanced at his own hands, a wave of disbelief struck him. Those tiny hands were not his. He had been reborn as an infant. For a 10-star grandmaster of his caliber, it was inconceivable that anyone could orchestrate such a thing without his awareness. At last, a single stunning conclusion illuminated his thoughts. The sacred dragon, the golden fruit, was all clear now. The fruit did not bestow immortality. It was the vessel of reincarnation. Instead of fear, a warmth bloomed inside him. He'd been granted another opportunity, a new existence to reclaim the pinnacle he had once lost. Soon after, Gilfus, his new name, realized he wasn't the only one here. The chamber was filled with other infants. Moments later, attendants entered carrying bottles filled with a thick crimson liquid, definitely not milk. Gilfus watched intently. As the strange substance was prepared, one attendant brought in a small goblin, forcing the concoction into its mouth. A moment later, the small creature began to convulse violently. A scarlet light erupted from its form, and it dissolved into a crimson mist that clouded the room. The spectacle left Gilfus frozen, his mind reeling with shock and confusion. An attendant calmly noted that the mixture would be fine once diluted properly. They then proceeded to feed the red liquid to the other infants. An attendant lifted Gilfus, holding a similar bottle at the ready. Seeing it up close, Gilfus knew instantly this was no ordinary nourishment. He could feel the immense power radiating from it, the essence of a dragon. Gilfus understood that such a potent substance was far too dangerous for a fragile infant's body. Before he could resist, the attendant pushed the bottle to his lips. An infant's instinct took over, and he began to swallow without hesitation. Immediately, an overwhelming power surged through his tiny frame. His whole body trembled with an agonizing, unbearable sensation. And yet, Gilfus knew exactly what was happening. The ancient dragon's essence was coursing through his veins. He was keenly aware of the peril, but he also recognized something crucial. Hidden within this risk was an unparalleled opportunity. If he could withstand and absorb this energy, he might just surpass the limits that had bound him in his past life. Perhaps this time, he could finally reach the martial arts zenith that had always eluded him. With fiery determination, he kept drinking the dragon's essence. His veins pulsed as his small body writhed, enduring a searing feeling that felt like it was consuming him from within. But his will never wavered. He held on, defying the shadowy grasp that sought to pull him under. Inside his tiny form, the powers of two immense dragons battled for dominance. When one finally prevailed, Gilfus's body began to adapt. The agony that had nearly torn him apart transformed into a calming strength. The attendants could only stare in disbelief. The infant who should have perished instantly had not only survived, but had finished every last drop. Within him, the two draconic energies finally merged into a perfect whole. He had conquered the dragon's essence, and his body had flawlessly assimilated it. A few other infants also seemed to endure, but none had managed to consume the entire portion as he had. In the quiet that followed, Gilfus recognized the sheer power of his own will to survive even in the form of a baby, but a profound drowsiness soon claimed him, and his consciousness began to fade. The small boy fell into a deep sleep. 7 years passed. In the backyard of the El Dragon family estate, a young boy was training, bare-chested under the blazing sun. With a massive boulder resting on his legs, he effortlessly performed one-handed push-ups. After hitting the 1,000 mark, he launched the rock into the air, catching it squarely on his back as it descended. This boy was Gilfus reborn. Now, he was known as Z-Dragon, every muscle on his frame a testament to years of grueling effort. For a child his age, his physical power was astonishing. Jie understood this was all thanks to the ancient dragon's essence flowing through him. In this realm, every creature held an innate wellspring of energy called a source of power. The ancient dragon's essence he consumed as a baby contained a truly immense amount of this energy. Those who managed to survive the ritual grew into humans with bodies far superior to most. The divine dragon source of power coursed through his veins. This strength had already propelled him beyond the limits he'd reached in his previous existence. He was the only infant to ever consume an entire vial of the ancient dragon's essence and not perish. His body had changed in ways he could never have imagined. However, amidst all his progress, one particular detail frustrated him. Despite his incredible physical prowess, he was still just at the 1-star level. In this world's power system, the number of stars a person possessed indicated how far their source power had developed. The human body was considered a small cosmos, the more stars shining within, the greater the power one wielded. Yet, the higher the star count, the more challenging it was to ascend to the next stage. In his past life, Gilfus El Dragon had shattered all expectations, achieving 10 stars, the only person to ever do so. Now, 7 years after his reincarnation, he was keenly aware of how quickly time was slipping away. Zeke was the unacknowledged son of the current patriarch of the Lao Dragon family. His mother had passed on when he was an infant, and he had never once laid eyes on his father. Tisik. this was the most pathetic form of responsibility a family leader could show. Even more jarring to him was how profoundly the world had changed. Millennia had passed since his last reincarnation. The world he remembered had become a place where only the most powerful thrived. One clear example was the custom of giving infants the ancient dragon's essence before putting them through a ritual called the Dragon Trial. Only the youths who successfully endured both stages were granted the privilege of training as warriors for the Dragon family. By all logic, Zik should have been among them. Yet, no matter how many times he questioned his caretaker about why no instructor ever came for him, the response was always the same. He was not permitted to know the reason. Even now at 7 years of age, not a single formal training session had ever been provided. It left him wondering in solitude. Every other child who survived the dragon trial was trained, but not him. He lived by himself in a little house on the edge of the main estate. His sole companion was a servant who seemed to conceal more than she ever spoke. Whenever Z pressed her on the matter, the servant would reply with a blank expression, as if his situation was completely normal. Z knew that physical conditioning was far more crucial than combat practice right now. He could always draw upon his fighting skills when the time was right. In a past life, he had reached the level of a 10-star warrior, and that memory was an inseparable part of him. One day, he pressed for details about any other surviving infants or any word from the main family that could offer a clue. But, as was routine, the attendant assigned to him flatly denied his request. The woman simply said she wasn't permitted to discuss such matters. A flash of disappointment crossed Zek's face. After 7 years with her, he had grown used to the same cold, emotionless reply. She was merely a 3-star practitioner tasked with his daily needs, and that was all. And yet, with her abilities, she could have easily guided him through the basics of martial art. But Zig had no interest in what he felt were trivial pursuits. Finally, Zig decided to leave the house and head into the forest. The attendant didn't move to stop him, only watching in silence as Zig strode away. In the quiet heart of the woods, Zig uprooted several toxic wild plants and swallowed them without a second thought. The taste was bitter and nauseating, but this ordeal was part of his training to fortify his body. While concentrating, he suddenly perceived something. There was an odd feeling as though he were being observed from a distance. His keen instincts flared, prompting him to hold his breath and remain perfectly still. Although he tried to dismiss it, the sensation refused to fade. He was sure that someone or something was watching him. A few moments later, he sensed a dark aura pulsing from within the tall grasses. As he turned, his eyes locked onto a ferocious beast, a creature known as an anger burl, a wild boar shrouded in a thick, black mist that pulsed with a strange and fearsome energy. It was a phenomenon he'd never encountered, not even 1,000 years ago. Without a trace of fear, Zig stood up and showed himself. The beast was startled and charged with incredible ferocity, yet Zig only offered a faint smile, held his breath, and gathered golden energy into his clenched fist. He unleashed a single punch, creating a powerful explosion that tore through the anger burrow, causing it to fall, its energy gone. Zig looked at the outcome with a gaze of pure satisfaction. His attack was immensely more powerful than he had anticipated. Even at just the 1-star level, his strength already outclassed most other practitioners. He lifted the creature's carcass onto his shoulders, thinking that his power would only continue to climb as he advanced. But underneath the success, a deep sense of fatigue was building. 7 years of neglect from the Dragon family had made him weary. He began to consider leaving that place to explore the world, maybe venturing toward the ocean, far away from their watchful eyes. Not too far away, a man in a dark cloak was observing him from the shadows of the trees. The man was astonished by Zeke's capability. Without any formal training, the boy had already achieved the 1-star level and had even managed to overcome an anger boar with a single strike. What was more shocking was that Zed had sensed his presence from the very beginning. In silence, the man contemplated the boy's origins. Zeke's mother had passed away when she was young, while his father was the very head of the Dragon family. He never showed the slightest interest in his son, who should have faded into obscurity without any guidance. And yet, the Eldragon heritage flowed through his veins, official or not. Because of that, he was always being watched by other figures who lived in the shadows. The man offered a faint smile, sensing the boy would become a captivating person to observe as he grew. With that thought, he melted back into the forest's darkness. Elsewhere, in his small home, Zig was getting ready to leave for good. He was gathering his things, about to walk away from it all, when he felt several powerful auras outside. 3 were practitioners of the 4th star, and 1 was an imposing 5th star. His departure was put on hold. He focused his hearing, trying to catch their conversation. From the way they spoke, Zig figured they weren't there to cause trouble. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, complimenting the fresh air and the quiet of the remote region. One even mentioned that Riff wasn't around. Zig chose to step out and meet them directly. The moment he opened the door, he saw the dragon family emblem on their clothes. He paused, realizing they were from his own clan. The men immediately greeted him with the utmost courtesy. The guards who had come for him introduced themselves politely. Zik was informed they had been ordered to escort him to the site of an examination. That statement made Z frown in confusion. He never imagined his summons was related to some kind of test. After all, he hadn't been given a single piece of basic knowledge since arriving. Several days later, he found himself returning to the main residence of the dragon family, a place that once stood as the center of power and a proud symbol of their lineage. This visit, however, wasn't for a long-term stay. The guards clarified that their mission was different this time, and before entering the main grounds, Zek was asked to change out of his soiled clothes. It was there that Zig learned of a place called the Dragon Nest. 1,000 years ago, the Lagan family had built a school for all branches of their descendants. Anyone who shared a connection with the family aspired to join the institution upon turning 7 years old, hoping to receive an education befitting a true dragon heir. That very day happened to coincide with the new student acceptance ceremony, and Zek was required to take the entrance exam. Upon realizing this, his enthusiasm faded. The whole reason he was brought back was simply to sit for this test. He had already been planning to leave this place behind to wander and discover his own identity. As he waited in front of the school gate, a boy with blue hair approached him. He looked anxious, yet his smile was kind. The boy named Rainjuice asked if Ji was doing all right. From a quick glance, Zach could tell that despite his shy demeanor, the energy flowing through Ranjus's body hinted at a sharp intuition and incredible potential. After they introduced themselves, the two chatted briefly about the trial they were about to face. Zik admitted he knew absolutely nothing about the exam, which left Ranjus stunned. To Ranjus, taking the Dragon Snatch exam with no preparation was practically asking for misfortune. He was about to explain further when the atmosphere on the grounds suddenly shifted. A loud, smug voice suddenly sliced through their conversation. A boy materialized, a mocking sneer plastered on his face as he glared at Ranjus. It was Retin, another kid from Ornizel village. He scoffed, telling Ranjis to just go home before he completely embarrassed himself. Retin was brimming with pride in his own status, absolutely convinced Ranjus didn't have a prayer of passing the trial. His condescending tone grew even sharper when he started on Ranjus's family. He jeered, calling Ranjus's father a pseudo-dragon and declaring that the offspring of a fake could never hope to achieve anything. The insult made Ranjus's hands tremble, but he furiously bottled up his anger. Sek, watching from the side, could feel the powerful emotional storm brewing inside the young boy. The Lagan family was known for its incredibly strict hierarchy. Their structure began with Novice W dragons, rising to Soldier Child dragons, then to Captain-level adult dragons, and finally to the Elder dragons who acted as the highest council. Way down at the very bottom of that pyramid, you'd find the Sato dragons. Those who failed the Dragon Nest trials were cast aside as immature, flawed dragons. In spite of this, Ranjis held a powerful resolve. He was determined to prove that even a pseudo-dragon was still a dragon and deserved respect. As Zeke observed the tense exchange, he decided Retin's confidence was ridiculously overblown. He could sense a different kind of strength within Ranges. It wasn't about raw power. It was a pure, unyielding spirit. From where Zek stood, the boy didn't seem weak at all. His remark apparently struck a nerve with some of the other arrogant participants. They were furious at the idea of being compared to the lowly pseudo-dragons. But before the argument could truly ignite, a man arrived, instantly capturing everyone's attention. He was the head examiner from the dragon nest, the adult dragon tasked with overseeing this year's selection. In a commanding voice, he announced that the entrance exam was about to begin and ordered all the contenders to get registered and grab their numbers. As he was leaving, Retin shot a venomous look at Zeke, vowing he would never forget the face of the person who dared to stand up to him. Zig let out a long sigh, trying to calm the tension in the air. He thought the kids of this generation seemed to have incredibly short fuses. And they were all about the same age, too. Ranges, standing beside him, seemed to understand completely. He knew anyone would get angry being called weak, especially in front of so many people. They both shifted their focus back to the challenge that lay ahead. For Zeke, taking part in the Dragon Nest selections seemed like an absolute necessity, but he was floored by what Ranges explained next. The trial wasn't completely mandatory. Apparently, you could get a pass if you had a special permit from the Eldragon family. It suddenly hit Zig just how little he understood about the way things worked in this era. Seeing his baffled expression, Ranges suggested that maybe he should pull out before he got hurt. But Zig immediately dismissed the thought. Backing down was never an option for him, even if he had no idea what kind of test he was walking into. Before long, they stood in the designated trial area. A vast field stretched before them, dominated by colossal stone monoliths at its center. An academy examiner stood before the hopefuls, his voice firm as he explained the test's single condition. To earn a place, a challenger needed only to leave a scratch on the massive stone behind him. Personal arms were forbidden. Only the weapons provided by the academy were permitted. However, anyone confident enough could use their bare hands. Every participant was given 3 attempts. The rules seemed almost trivial, a task too simple for some. That illusion was shattered the moment the first applicant stepped forward. Though visibly anxious, the boy channeled all his might into his attack. A deafening clang of metal on stone reverberated across the grounds. In a flash, the boy's sword fractured, and the stone's reactive force overwhelmed his arm. The outcome sent a ripple of shock through everyone, including Zek. While the boy struggled with the immense discomfort, the examiner watched without a flicker of emotion, then informed him that 2 chances were still available. But since the participant could no longer get to his feet, he was disqualified and guards promptly escorted him from the arena. A heavy tension settled over the crowd when the next number was announced. Several applicants swallowed hard, realizing the profound danger in what first appeared to be a minor challenge. Ranges, standing near Zek, began to shake, while Zek himself just watched with a blank look. A sense of letdown washed over him. He hadn't expected the Dragon's Nest exam to be so straightforward yet so unforgiving. Based on whispers from the overseers, it became clear the stones possessed a remarkable regenerative quality. Any scratch that appeared would vanish in the blink of an eye. Beyond that, the stone could rebound a physical strike with 100 times its original power. Zek felt such a material was excessive for a mere entrance exam. But Ranges explained that if a person could perfectly channel their source power through their body before striking, there was still a chance to mark the stone. That insight made Zek grasp the core of this trial. It wasn't a measure of raw physical brawn. It was a test of one's command over their source power. He glanced around, guessing that only a small fraction of the participants could pull it off, including the boastful kids who had caused a scene earlier. One after another, candidates stepped up, but the majority were unsuccessful. Many of them were violently repelled, suffering scrapes and bruises, some even losing consciousness from the rebound of their own amplified force. When Zek's turn was called, he became the center of attention. He strode calmly toward the center of the arena while Ranges watched from behind, his unease growing by the second, and he was worried XCH would actually follow through on his earlier claim and attempt the trial with his bare hands. That worry solidified into reality when Zek bypassed the table of offered weapons. He simply looked at the huge stone before him and stated that his fist was all he needed. A low murmur spread through the assembly. More than a few laughed at his declaration. They were sure it was a ridiculous move. An ordinary person's hand would be turned to powder before it even touched the stone's surface. Some older applicants even assumed Zek was simply looking for a fast exit from the competition. Rang just watched, a knot of fear and regret twisting in his gut for not stopping this sooner. The signal was given. Zach stepped to the massive stone, pressing his palm against its ancient, cold surface. He could instantly feel its unnatural density. This thing, he mused, had to be a relic, forged thousands of years ago from some long-forgotten material. He didn't hesitate, pulling the source power from deep within himself. The energy coiled through him like a whip, gathering into the single point of his fist. While Ranges held his breath in sheer terror, Zach felt a jolt of pure excitement. For the first time since he'd arrived in this new life, he could finally let loose. This stone would be the perfect way to measure his true capabilities. Ranges' eyes went wide as Zach unleashed the first form of the legendary dragon-shattering art, Burst Strike, sending it crashing into the monolith with breathtaking force. The impact unleashed a titanic explosion of energy. Jagged fragments of stone shot out in every direction. A furious shockwave kicked up a blinding whirlwind of dust and debris. In a mix of awe and alarm, Rangus threw up his arms to shield himself from the blast. Nearby, the examiner stared, his mouth agape, unable to process what he'd just seen. When the dust finally settled, Zach stood there with a wry smile. "Hey, guess that technique's still a bit much for this body," he commented. His hand was a complete mess, yet he let out a soft chuckle. It was a thrilling reminder that he still had so much training ahead of him. The other participants were frozen in stunned silence. Retton's face was a mask of shock and fury that Zach had actually obliterated the enchanted stone. From the crowd, a young woman whispered to herself, "Well, now he definitely has my attention." While everyone was still reeling, Zach calmly waited for the examiner's decision. The man, however, seemed to be in another world. The monolith Zach had just demolished was a self-repairing artifact that only a 4-star warrior should have been able to crack. And yet, this young man, this kid had just accomplished the impossible. "He's just an outcast from the family," the examiner muttered. Could his power truly stem from the main family's lineage after all? And that fighting style, it felt disturbingly familiar. Still lost in his thoughts, the examiner remained silent. "So, did I pass or what?" Zach finally called out, his patience wearing thin. The question jolted the man back to reality. "Passed? You passed," he stammered hastily. Another official came forward and shoved a small vial of green liquid into his hand. "What's this?" Zach asked, intrigued. "Move along," the man grunted dismissively. "You're holding up the line. How incredibly rude." Zach scowled, wondering if everyone in this era was such a jerk. Before he could say another word, Ranges came sprinting over, his face alight with pure adrenaline. "Zach, that was absolutely unbelievable." With a proud grin, Zeke brushed it off, saying it was nothing special. He then gestured to the green vial, and Ranges explained that it was a healing potion, a unique concoction exclusive to the Eldragon family. "A healing potion?" Zeke repeated, a hint of doubt in his voice, but Ranges nodded reassuringly. Given his estranged relationship with the family, a flicker of suspicion crossed Zeke's mind. What if it was a trick? But since it came from Ranges, he entertained a far more intriguing idea. Perhaps it was a fabled spirit medicine. The legendary elixir known as cloud-piercing clarity wood was crafted from the rarest of components. It required flora found only in hidden realms. blended with the pure source power of a divine being and the very essence of a mythical spirit beast. Such a brew could mend any injury, old or new, and even amplify the user's own source power. Because of its incredibly demanding ingredients and creation process, the elixir was virtually unseen in the outside world. After drinking it, Zeke felt an astonishingly fast wave of recovery wash over his entire body. "Is this actually spirit medicine?" he asked Ranges, amazed. To his surprise, Ranges admitted he'd never even heard of spirit medicine. He only knew that the Eldragon family's creations were far superior to any other remedies available. Ranges then leaned in, asking, "So did the effect catch you off guard?" "You have no idea," Zeke confirmed. He described how the liquid erased the aches from his severe injuries and the exhaustion from his training. It wasn't quite a spirit medicine since it didn't boost his source power, but Ranges just stared at Zeke in awe, admitting he was far more stunned by the young man's own formidable strength. Zeke let out a small, easy laugh at the compliment. He mused internally that the potion was a testament to how far knowledge had progressed in the last 1,000 years. As Ranges continued to praise his abilities, Zeke simply affirmed his goal to become the most powerful of them all. It wasn't long before the examiner announced that Retton and his crew had also passed the trial. Zeke had expected as much, but his focus immediately shifted to Ranges, who began to tremble when his number was called. Despite his nerves, Ranges steeled himself and walked toward the stage. Noticing his friend's stiff movements, Zeke wondered why he was so wound up and shouted, "Hey, just believe in yourself, you've got this." An embarrassed Ranges hissed for Zeke to keep his voice down. He selected a sword as his weapon, and Zeke watched intently, curious to see what would unfold. The moment the examiner gave the signal, Ranges charged the stone. As expected, his first strike was a complete failure, but Ranges refused to quit. He got back up and swung again, only for the rebound to throw him off balance, sending him tumbling to the ground. Both of his hands were shaking intensely from the impact. Retton and his cronies erupted in laughter, as if they knew this would happen all along. "What did you expect?" one of them jeered. "The son of a fake dragon is just another fake." The mocking laughter echoed as Ranges stumbled and fell once more. "Just give it up already," they shouted. Retton shot a smug glance at Zeke. "Is this the guy you said would pass? The one who's supposedly stronger than us?" Zeke didn't answer right away. He paused for a moment, his expression unreadable, before saying flatly, "Enough of your pointless chatter. This is your final attempt," the examiner declared. He then asked, "Are you sure you want to proceed?" Ranges couldn't speak, his chest tight with shame from the relentless teasing. He simply hung his head in silence. But suddenly, Zeke strode forward to his side. In a sharp voice, he challenged Ranges, asking why he'd chosen a sword instead of a spear. He scolded him, saying that facing the trial without a proper strategy was a fool's errand. Retton watched with a sneer as Zeke spoke. Ranges wouldn't be able to scratch that stone even if he tried 1,000 times. A fresh wave of laughter erupted from Retton's group. They called Zeke a fool, pointing out that Ranges had zero skill with a spear. His weak father had only ever taught him swordsmanship. Changing weapons now would change nothing. However, Zeke paid them no mind, turning to the examiner to ask if a weapon change was permitted. The man confirmed that no rule forbade it. "Well then, it's your lucky day," Zeke said with a faint smile. He looked at Ranges intently and asked, "Do you trust me?" For a moment, bitter memories of the taunts against him and his father flooded Ranges's mind. All the indignities they had endured. He balled his fists, set his jaw, and stared straight ahead. With newfound resolve, he announced that he would trust Zeke. He would fight with the spear just as he was told. Ranges recalled how his own father had failed to enter the dragon's den, earning the nickname Fake Dragon. Yet despite the constant scorn, his father never broke. He endured it all just to raise Ranges properly. As of that, Ranges vowed to prove that he The sun raised through such sacrifice was also a true dragon. He rose to his feet again, filled with purpose, gripping the spear tightly. Today, he would prove that neither he nor his father was an imposter. He also realized that sticking with the sword would only lead to the same failure. So this time, he decided to put his complete faith in Zeke. The only problem was, he had no idea how to wield a spear. Zeke then shouted to him, pointing toward the magically infused stone. He said that rangies didn't need to overthink it. Just thrust your spear directly into that rock. Focus on nothing else, he said firmly. Ranges inhaled deeply, his grip tightening. He knew logically that stabbing the stone wouldn't leave a mark, let alone shatter it. The rock possessed incredibly powerful regenerative abilities, but Zeke was the very first person to ever stand by his side even though they had just met that day. That sense of trust felt completely new to Ranges, and for that very reason he chose to believe in Zeke and in his own potential without reservation. He began to channel his source power into the spear and instantly felt something strange. He had trained with a sword for countless years, but never once had he been able to envelop it with this much energy. Now, with the spear in his hands, the power surged naturally. With a determined roar, he charged, pouring every ounce of his strength into a single thrust. Rangas slammed the spear against the stone. Retin could barely contain his smirk, convinced it was just another pointless attempt in sneering that a new weapon wouldn't change a thing. But Ranges pushed on, sensing a strange new connection. It was as if the spear had become a part of him. With one final, desperate shove, the tip of the spear broke through the enchanted barrier of the stone. Silence crashed over the arena, the shocked faces of Retin and his cronies turning the air rigid. Even the examiners were visibly stunned, their eyes wide at the incredible feat they had just witnessed. He hadn't just nicked the stone, he had driven the spear clean through, shattering it completely. Zeke rushed to his side, beaming with pride. Ranges stood there, dazed, barely able to process what he'd just accomplished. Even as the examiner announced his success, his voice trembled as he asked if he had truly passed. Zeke grinned, clapping him on the shoulder with a firm nod. A wave of emotion washed over Ranges, his eyes stinging. Overcome with joy, he pulled Zeke into a tight embrace, shouting, "I did it! I passed the test." Retin's crew could only gawk, their jaws hanging open. They mumbled about it being a lucky shot, but Retin was silent, his whole body shaking with fury. He couldn't stomach the fact that Zeke had been right all along. Ranges wasn't just their equal. He had completely left them in the dust. A short while later, an examiner called out that the official trials were now concluded. He added that the acceptance ceremony was about to begin. "So that's really in?" Zeke asked, just to be sure. "Looks like it," Ranges answered. "Though I bet there are more challenges waiting for us inside the dragon's lair." Just then, a group of figures appeared from a shadowy passage at the far end of the hall. As they strode onto the floor, an examiner announced that the head of the L-Dragon family himself would congratulate the successful candidates. The moment Zeke laid eyes on the man in the lead, he wondered aloud who the guy with the ice-cold, grim expression was. Rangius, suddenly tense, explained that it was the family head himself. "That's the head of the family," Zeke muttered. "What's with the permanent scowl? He looks colder than a frozen tundra." Rangas quickly clapped a hand over Zeke's mouth, whispering urgently for him to please keep quiet. Zeke gave a slight nod. Looking back at the imposing group, he understood he was staring at the core strength of the L-Dragon family. Some were at the 7-star level, while others were 10-star. Their collective power was staggering, and leading them all was the current head, Balsa L-Dragon, a 12-star powerhouse. 1,000 years ago, reaching such a level was almost unheard of. A dark, simmering energy radiated from Balsa, pressing down on everyone in the hall. The examiner quickly called for silence, announcing that Master Balsa would now speak. Balsa stepped forward and spoke only a handful of words. "All of you must strive to become the very essence of the L-Dragon family." The immense pressure of his presence washed over the hall, and many of the candidates began to tremble. Some even struggled for breath, frozen in place by the overwhelming force. Zeke remained unfazed, but he saw that Rangi's was caught in its grip. It seemed everyone was completely overwhelmed by the family head's sheer presence. But Zek perceived something more, a deep-seated animosity concealed within Balsa's presence. Once Balsa turned away, a young man with blonde hair stepped forward, capturing everyone's gaze. He smiled, offering his gratitude to Balsa for the speech. He assured the new students that Master Balsa simply had great expectations for all of them, and much like his mentor, he intended to keep his own remarks brief. The man's only request was for every participant to train diligently and grow stronger. An examiner nearby whispered, "Is that really all he's going to say?" The man added with a grin that worrying about this small stuff is the fastest way to lose your hair. For that reason, he was skipping the long-winded speech. A wave of relief and laughter lightened the mood in the hall. The examiner then announced it was time to assign the new students to their respective dormitories. Each student was instructed to proceed to their assigned hall as their name was called. Zek wondered aloud if they'd be in the same dorm, but Rangi's explained there were 4 halls: East, West, South, and North. Every student admitted to the academy was assigned to one of those 4 great halls. When Zek's name was finally called, he rose and gave Rangi's a quick wave, heading off to his assignment in the East Hall. As he navigated the corridors, he couldn't help but notice how much the academy had transformed. Over the last 1,000 years, after finally locating his room, he figured he must have gotten turned around, taking so long that his new roommate was probably already settled in. The moment the door swung open, Zek offered a cheerful greeting. "Sorry I'm late. Looks like we're roommates from today on." He froze, his eyes widening in utter disbelief at who was standing before him. It was Rangi's. Zek burst out laughing. It felt as if destiny was intent on weaving their paths together. He asked if anything else was scheduled for the day, and Rangi's confirmed that their real training would begin in the morning. They both agreed to get some rest, anticipating the grueling regimen that awaited them tomorrow. A month flew by at the academy. Their training grew increasingly intense, requiring them to wield heavy dumbbells in each hand. The instructor explained that the dragon's breath technique they were currently practicing was one of the most significant skills ever developed. Created by the 10th head of the L Dragon family, he declared it was absolutely essential for every student to master the technique under any circumstances. As his gaze swept over the students, he could see that a few had already gained a respectable grasp of Dragon's breath. He took special note of a young woman he called Leek. The energy she projected showed she was on the verge of reaching the 2-star level. But beyond her, another student's performance was so astonishing it made the instructor question his own eyes. It was Zek practicing the form, while holding the dumbbells and balancing an enormous stone on his head and arms. The instructor was speechless, muttering that the lineage of the family head truly coursed through Zek's veins. And yet Zek had never received any formal instruction as a child, making the entire display a fascinating puzzle. Zek himself was inwardly amazed. He saw how the technique he had once called the Dragon King's breathing method had been refined by successive family heads and was now being taught to the branch families. As he recalled, the breathing technique drew source power from one's surroundings into the body, circulating it to amplify internal energy. Its ultimate power was always determined by the user's own talent and insight. It's why the great families guarded their techniques so fiercely, never allowing outsiders or those not of their direct line to learn the secrets. The modern version of Dragon's Breath was safe, simplified for anyone to learn, but Zeke knew a technique was useless if you had to stand still to use it. His original version allowed the user to manipulate source power, even while in motion, making it infinitely more complex and devastating in a real fight. Of course, it was also incredibly difficult. Very few ever truly mastered it. Zeke mused that the current generation must have watered down his original work so even the branched families could learn it. A clever move, he admitted, one that undoubtedly strengthened the Eldragon clan as a whole. A quiet pride swelled in Zeke, realizing the technique he'd forged thousands of years ago still shaped the world. It made him wonder what other martial arts he'd created had evolved into over the long centuries. Across the hall, Lega watched him, her gaze calm but intensely focused. In the cafeteria, other students stared, completely shocked by the mountain of food Zeke was putting away. As he ate, Zeke noticed Ranjis just staring at his plate from across the table. "Why aren't you eating more?" he asked. "You'll never get stronger that way." Ranjis just looked at him strangely. "Don't you feel off? Your stamina is unnatural." Zeke just shrugged. "The secret to power is simple. Eat more, train harder." He even pushed a plate toward his friend, who politely refused. Zeke's attention was drawn to a few students who clearly had formal training before arriving at the academy. Just then, a girl with an aura of calm confidence approached their table. "You're quite impressive, Zeke." He casually looked up. "And you are?" Ranjis nearly choked on his drink, whispering, "That's Master Lega, daughter of the great Lord Balsa." Zeke's expression remained cold. "Never heard of her. What do you want?" Lega's eyes narrowed with curiosity. "Is it true? Are you really the headmaster's illegitimate son?" "I am his son," Zeke confirmed, though not by his wife. "No." "Then tell me," Lega pressed. "How can an illegitimate child like you shatter a magic stone with his bare hands? How can someone outside the main family lines possess such incredible power?" "Finish your food, Ranges," Zeke said confidently, completely ignoring her question. "Stop staring." For a moment, both Leka and Ranges were stunned into silence before a slow smile spread across Leka's face. "You really are interesting." She slid into the seat next to him with a proposition. "I want you to become my follower. I will be your shield and your closest ally." Zeke raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm offering an alliance," Leka stated plainly. "I want you to join my faction. Every illegitimate child needs powerful friends and influence to survive. Lend me your strength to help me become the next head of my family," she declared, "and I promise, once I succeed, I will help you achieve any dream you desire." Zeke's rejection was swift and absolute. "Not interested." Leka's smile vanished, her eyes turning to ice as she tried to intimidate him. A faint energy shimmered around her, a sign she was on the cusp of reaching the 2-star level. Remarkable for someone her age. That kind of strength screamed of exceptional talent. Unfazed, Zeke confirmed he had no interest in leading any family or holding any title. He plunged his knife into the table, declaring he served no one and was already the strongest there was. The cafeteria fell silent for a moment. Even Leka was taken aback, stunned by Zeke's commanding presence. Ranges quickly tried to ease the tension, asking them both to calm down. But Leka, insulted and furious, decided to challenge Zeke to a duel. Zeke paid her no mind. He simply went back to his meal. The commotion soon became the talk of the entire campus as students whispered about the confrontation. Some explained that a duel between the younger generation was about to happen, and Master Lega herself was one of the fighters. Many were shocked, wondering who would be bold enough to challenge a daughter of the Tefon family. On the training grounds, a crowd of curious students stared, trying to guess who would dare face Master Lega. Zeke remained calm, though a worried Ranges warned him that his opponent was no ordinary person. Ranges explained that Master Lega was the daughter of Lord Balsa Eldragon and also carried the lineage of the Ten family, one of the 4 great houses that supported Eldragon. She was a prodigy with immense talent who had mastered the Tefon family's lightning sword techniques from a young age. Zeke merely nodded, quietly sizing up the situation. Ranges emphasized that Zeke had to understand his opponent because Master Lega was a true force. The position of family head was incredibly important and a major source of conflict between the branches. As a result, the other candidates each represented their own branch of the Eldragon family at Dragon Nest. To face her siblings, Leka needed powerful allies. As Zeke took in the context of the power struggle among the four main branches of the Dragon family, he continued to assess everything calmly, showing no personal interest or ambition to get involved in their dispute. Lika stood with her sword driven into the ground before her. A subtle electric aura pulsed around her, a clear sign she was ready for their duel. Ranger stepped back, trembling, and warned Zik to be careful. Lika announced that to become the next head of the family, she first had to defeat Jean and make him one of her followers. The fight between Zeke and Leko was about to begin, under the curious gaze of the students as tension peaked across the training field. Leka stated that as a candidate to lead her family, she had to build up more than just her knowledge and strength, but also her influence by gathering powerful followers. Without further delay, she shot toward Zik. She declared she would defeat him right then and there, making him her subordinate. Zik dodged the initial attack with ease. Along with the powerful barrage of strikes that followed, Leka kept pressing forward, giving him no space. The spectators were captivated by the speed of their exchange. Leka's assault, even while wielding a massive great sword, was so fluid and swift it seemed almost effortless. The onlooking crowd began to marvel at Leka's precise control of her energy. Noticing her attacks growing progressively faster and stronger, they watched in awe, witnessing the power of a daughter from one of the main family branches. Many spectators were certain the fight was already decided. What they didn't see was Leka's own growing exasperation. She couldn't fathom how Zeke dodged her every assault, making her feel like he was just toying with her. Ranges, observing from a distance, couldn't hide his amazement. His initial worry dissolved as he watched Zeke's serene and confident movements. Zeke was studying the martial style Leka employed, recognizing that her form was significantly faster than the usual one-star fighter. "Stop talking and fight," Leka demanded, her patience gone. Zeke deflected her advance with barely emotion, then countered with a precise strike that found its mark. Leia coughed, stumbling to her knees while gripping her sword and stomach. The audience erupted in stunned whispers, wondering how Zeke could possibly evade all of Leka's attacks, and just who this mysterious boy truly was. Leka struggled to rise, asking why none of her attacks could touch him. She was well aware her speed was far beyond any other one-star combatant. Logically, Zeke should have been completely overwhelmed by her pace. Zeke conceded that her speed was indeed superior to any one-star fighter he knew. "But in my eyes," he stated calmly, "you are still just a one-star." Leka insisted that her velocity should have been impossible for him to match. Zeke explained that by observing her breathing, the flicker of her eyes, and the subtle shifts in her muscles, he could read her every move. Using his experience to anticipate her next action, Leka lunged forward again in a flash, but Zeke sidestepped with ease and unleashed a counterblow that sent her flying into a wall with incredible force. A collective gasp swept through the crowd as they saw Leka get hit. "Amazing!" Rangers shouted in awe. "He actually defeated Master Laker?" However, Zeke simply stated, "The match isn't over yet." As the dust cleared, Fleka was standing once more, bruised but utterly defiant. Zeke observed how she was channeling energy to her core, a technique that let her withstand his attack without serious injury. Ranges begged Zeke to end it, but Zeke warned him to move aside to avoid being caught in the next exchange. Just then, Zeke felt a surge of aura from Leia. She was on the verge of reaching the 2-star level. The audience noticed it too, as glowing markings on her body confirmed she was now a 2-star, her aura shining a brilliant white. Lake offered her thanks to Zeke, explaining that their battle had pushed her to achieve the 2-star level far sooner than she had anticipated. She declared with newfound confidence that he no longer stood a chance of winning. With her aura flaring, she shot toward Zeke, her great sword radiating with crackling energy. Zeke simply laughed, looking genuinely thrilled by the turn of events. He dodged another incredibly fast attack and complimented Leka on her improved speed. But Zeke's expression changed when he felt a faint sting on his cheek. A thin cut had appeared. Leica smiled. "Now do you see the difference in our strength?" She proclaimed that, as a full 2-star with control over her aura, she would now reveal the true power of the great world technique she had been taught. Zeke's face lit up with excitement, eager to witness a martial arts style he had never seen before. The moment had become the absolute peak of their thrilling duel. Leica suddenly unleashed her ultimate ability, the lightning greatsword technique. Brilliant flashes of light danced around her sword. A radiant golden energy ignited as she surged forward. Zek was instantly overwhelmed by an electrical tempest, stumbling back with a grunt. Leah swept her blade low and a golden radiance pulsed from her. "You seem a little stunned," she remarked coldly, summoning another assault. Lightning net. A luminous web of energy shot toward Zek, but he twisted away at the last moment, drawing gasps from the audience. Ever since Liek achieved her 2-star level, the fight's momentum had completely shifted. Rengus watched from a distance, his expression filled with concern. Zek observed that Liek's moves were still fundamentally simple, unchanged from her 1-star version. However, every swing of her sword now hummed with immense power. Her lightning greatsword technique unleashed incredible force, her aura amplifying each attack. Lee's speed was far greater than Zek anticipated, and her electrical energy felt mysteriously erratic. Still, Zek remained composed, confident in his ability to predict her strikes. As he dodged the relentless onslaught, he analyzed Lekka's every motion. Studying her aura and rhythm, Lika noticed Zek's serene smile as he gracefully evaded her, her own grin tightening into a frown. "You're much too calm for someone in this position," she taunted, lunging once more. Her blade flared, wreathed in golden arcs of light. Zeke again sidestepped just in time. "She's like the storm itself," he thought, just before the blade slammed into him, launching him backward in a shockwave of dust and debris. Rangies cried out in shock, starting to run toward the chaos. But another spectator grabbed his arm. Zek was already pushing himself up. His clothes were scorched, but his determination was untouched. Leek unleashed another lightning flash, striking Zek directly, but he held his ground. Lika's brow furrowed with disbelief. Rangus rushed forward, pleading with her to stop, saying they had all witnessed her strength. But Lega refused, insisting that ending the match prematurely would be an insult to Zeke. Defeated, Rangies turned and begged Zek to forfeit. But Zek only offered a reassuring smile. Matika tensed. Though an outcast, Zek was a proud Lagon. He raised his sword high, his aura blazing. "If that's the case, I'll use everything I have to finish this." Thunder cracked across the sky as Layak invoked her first secret art, Heaven Thunder. A massive wave of golden energy crashed down, obliterating the ground where Zek stood. Lightning rained down on his body in a tempest of divine fury. Rang just screamed as he saw his friend engulfed by the golden storm. Smoke rose from his charred figure. Lega planted her sword in the ground, letting out a long breath. "I'm sorry, Zek," she said softly, "but it's over." Just then, a pillar of golden lightning erupted into the sky. Lika's eyes went wide as she whirled around, unable to believe it. Zek was standing there, smiling calmly, his arm crackling with golden sparks. "This is a lightning aura," he said nonchalantly. He explained he had deliberately taken her hits to understand the flow of her energy, and in the process had unintentionally learned to command it himself. Leek was speechless with fury, struggling to process the impossible reality before her. Zek continued to endure Lika's ferocious attacks. All the while, the dragon breath technique he'd been quietly activating was about to reveal its true purpose. His every breath mirrored the storm. A strange golden energy ignited within him. In a flash, everything shifted. The lightning became an extension of his own being. This connection was no accident. Leek's power resonated with his El Dragon heritage. The family's legendary greatsword arts proved their bloodline was one with the storm itself. With this sudden clarity, Zeke stepped forward, a new fire in his eyes. The grueling fight now felt like the perfect training ground. His body pulsed with the current as gold sparks danced across his skin. The raw power inside him surged to its absolute peak. A brilliant flash of gold washed over the arena. Lika met his challenge with a spirited roar, her own massive blade glowing intensely. Her swing unleashed a wave of crackling light that tore through the air. But Zek moved with impossible speed. He simply disappeared, leaving only a faint trail of lightning. In an instant, he reappeared on the opposite side of the field. Her devastating attack hit nothing but vibrating air. His body felt lighter now, yet wildly unpredictable. It was as if the storm had rewritten his very muscles and nerves. His movements were a blur to the human eye. From the stands, Rangies could only stare in disbelief. The two fighters were now just twin streaks of light. Their clash was a symphony of endless rolling thunder. Amidst the chaos, it was obvious Lika's attacks were missing their mark. Zek had taken complete control of the fight's rhythm. Pushed into a corner, Lika focused all her remaining strength for one last move. Her blade trembled and then unleashed an explosive burst of energy toward him. Yet Zek parried it with an effortless grace, wielding the new power as his own. For a split second, his form became one with the golden light, moving beyond the confines of space. Lightning spun in his hand, forming the intricate spiral of a dragon. A technique he had only ever imagined now took shape. In one swift motion, he unleashed his final attack. Dragon Destruction Combat Arts, a special form. Lightning peaked. The golden torrent slammed directly into Leeza, swallowing her in a roaring tempest. A blinding explosion of light filled the arena. When the thunder subsided, Leica was on her knees, shaking. Her sword had slipped from her grasp as sparks still danced around her. The once well-estioning arena fell completely silent. Every eye was on the lone figure standing tall in the fading light. Zek, the heir, reborn. Leica slowly pushed herself up. Her body was weak, but her eyes still burned with determination. He recognized Zek's power was beyond human, earning his respect in defeat. He accepted the outcome with dignity before everyone. It was clear he had faced someone truly extraordinary. Hours later, deep within a dimensional rift, stood Balsa el-Dragon, the patriarch of the Yell-Dragon family and father to Zeke and Leica, was surrounded by 1,000 feral beasts. His powerful draconic presence made the very air vibrate with each step. As the creatures lunged, a sharp light flared from his eyes. It released a stunning wave of energy that froze every beast around him. Into the sudden, tense silence, Balsa unsheathed his blade. With a single, flawless arc, he unleashed the first form of the Dragon Destruction Combat Arts. In an instant, hundreds of creatures vanished without a sound. As his sword returned to its scabbard, the El-Dragon forces moved in to secure the area. Balsa turned toward the rift's exit, but a soldier stopped him with urgent news. Upon hearing that his daughter Leica had reached the 2-star level, a dim light flickered in Balsa's eyes. His expression didn't change, but the atmosphere around him grew icy. He remained perfectly still, radiating a cold, intimidating pressure. The soldier delivered his report with a nervous tone. He explained that achieving 2 stars at age 7 was an incredible feat. With Leica's inherent talent, she could potentially reach 4 or even 5 stars after graduating from the Dragon Nest. To Balsa, however, this was merely useless information. He valued concrete achievements, not praise for unproven potential. As he stepped toward the exit of the dimensional rift, he paused when the soldier added that Leica had just lost a training duel. His gaze went flat as he assessed the weight of this development. The loss hadn't been to her brother or a senior student, but to Zek, a boy her own age. The name made Balsa fall silent. His mind drifted to an image of a humble servant, Zek's mother, a woman who had once shown immense talent in battle. But she had passed on shortly after bringing the child into the world. Balsa wondered who could have trained the boy to overcome a 2-star practitioner. When he learned Zek had received no formal instruction, his face remained a mask, but he privately noted such raw ability was significant. After a moment's pause, he gave an order for the first trial to begin at once. This was despite combat training having started only a month ago, when his subordinate objected that most students hadn't even reached the 1-star level. Balsa asserted that true peril doesn't wait for one to be ready, and only those who could endure were fit to bear the L-Dragon name. He then gave a second order, summon Freya for an immediate return. The command was a shock to his soldier, as Freya was a figure the Patriarch seldom called upon directly. But Balsa had his own reasons. If Zek could truly handle Leica alone, the boy was far more fascinating than he'd ever imagined. He decided Freya would design and personally oversee the first trial. Once the order was given, a rare, thin smile touched Balsi's lips, a flicker of an expression that betrayed his profound curiosity about the kid. The following morning, the dragon's nest echoed once more with the sounds of intense training. Under Rangis's watchful eye, the students drilled the striking forms of the dragon combat arts. But on the far side of the training grounds, Zek's method was entirely his own. He held a perfect wall sit, a massive stone balanced precariously on his head, with heavy weights clutched in each hand. His unwavering focus drew the silent, captivated stares of the other trainees. All the while he was mentally dissecting the very technique everyone else was practicing. He remembered that this particular martial art was founded by the 15th head of the family. It wasn't just about fighting. It was a comprehensive system for conditioning the body. The forms were simple, but brutally efficient. Their simplicity allowed new students to grasp them quickly. So when Rangis called for him to join, Zek simply glanced over, calmly stating he'd already figured it out that morning. Rangis's expression was pure disbelief, but Zek went a step further, pointing out the instability in his friend's energy flow. With a quiet confidence, he corrected it with a gentle, focused touch of his own energy. The moment he did, Rangis felt an immediate shift. It was as if his internal aura was suddenly flowing without obstruction. He stared at Zek, his eyes wide with genuine awe. Zek, for his part, seemed to appreciate the art's elegant simplicity. For him, the balance and stability of the Strike Dragon combat arts were a faint echo of his old family's legacy. The Dragon Destruction combat arts, a staggeringly complex style that he alone had ever truly loved. The Dragon Destruction combat arts was infamous for being both incredibly intricate and demanding immense fortitude. But hidden within its complexity was a truly terrifying power. The style had 4 core forms, but during his clash with Leica, Zek had forged a 5th. And beyond even that, there was one final, hidden secret. The ultimate, most destructive form. An incredible power he'd once used to bring down a divine dragon in his previous life. The memory made him wonder how his descendants had treated the legacy of that dragon art. Had they altered it? Perhaps even perfected it over the generations? The very idea sparked a fire in him, fueling his drive to push forward. With renewed purpose, he turned back to his physical conditioning. He believed that while everyone finds their own path to mastering a style, a well-trained body was the foundation for it all. But before he could even begin, Rangis called out to him, his voice urgent. The young man pleaded for Zek to teach him, fully aware of how audacious his request sounded. He just wanted to become stronger, even if only by a little. Zek studied him for a long moment before giving a single, calm nod. Rangis was stunned. He never expected Zek to agree so readily. But to Zek, a genuine desire to learn was always something to be valued, and he decided Rangis was more than worthy of his guidance. A moment later, Leica walked over, a flicker of doubt in her eyes overshadowed by a steely resolve. She announced her intention to join their training. While Rangis looked utterly stunned, Leica's composure was absolute. She confessed that she once considered herself unmatched among the young L-Dragon successors. However, the recent contest had completely shattered that illusion. It was still a mystery to her how Zik could command lightning aura with even greater mastery than she possessed. Zeke's response was simply calm. It was partly a joke, yet it held a hint of responsibility, as if acknowledging he was the cause of her current unease. Leica then voiced her burning desire to become more powerful enough to rival her own siblings and even leave Zig in her dust. Her declaration made Zig pause. As he considered his reply, Leica watched him with a hopeful gaze. Meanwhile, Ranges pointed out that Zyke, as a contender for the L-Dragon inheritance, also had a right to decide. It was an open secret that even without formal recognition, the potent L-Dragon lineage coursed through him. He was part of the succession, like it or not. In a tone that was flat but firm, Zek replied that he didn't mind training them, but he wondered if Lekka's body was truly ready for an intense regimen after their battle. Based on his own assessment, the injuries she sustained should have required a full month of rest to heal completely. Lek quickly assured him she had used a healing elixir and was no longer a cause for concern. Hearing this, Zek exchanged a look with Ranges. They murmured quietly, speculating on the incredible efficacy of the potion she used. Ranges suspected it was no common remedy like the ones from the entrance exam, but a unique version available only to the daughter of the Dragon Clan's chief. Zig was genuinely impressed by the modern marvels that could create such a potent brew. Lek nodded, conceding that without its aid, she would likely still be bedridden and helpless, but this was about something far more important than recovery. The opportunity to learn was everything to her. She was determined to grow stronger under Zeke's mentorship, and her voice rang with unwavering conviction. Zeke accepted her request almost instantly. He remarked that he never turned away young people who showed such powerful ambition. His answer astonished both Leah and Ranges. They could only stare at him in wonder, especially when Zig added that a spirit like hers always commanded respect. He even teased Leica with a light-hearted jab, asking if she was absolutely sure she wanted to learn from the very person who had just bested her. In the arena, Leek answered firmly that defeat was never a reason to back down. As a future clan leader, her only choice was to press onward. Zach recalled their first encounter, when Leica had proudly declared her ambition to lead the L-Dragon family. With genuine curiosity, he asked her the reason behind such a powerful goal. Lake replied, revealing the harsh reality that if she failed, her fate was to be a pawn in a political marriage. She admitted, with a bitter tone, that in the best-case scenario, she would likely be forced into a union with her own cousin. And the absolute worst fate being promised. As he listened, Zik's good humor vanished, replaced by a grim shadow. A quiet fury began to smolder just beneath his calm exterior. It intensified when Leica confessed this was just how things were in the L-Dragon family. Their ancestral line was considered too precious to be diluted by outsiders. This unique source of their power had twisted the family into an obsession with maintaining their pure heritage. The personal feelings of the heirs meant absolutely nothing. Zik's voice turned sharp and icy. He spoke of how the L-Dragon family had fallen, lost in a repulsive tradition. His hands clenched, radiating a fierce urge to shatter the hollow, meaningless customs they clung to. But before the tension could escalate, several instructors arrived, instantly capturing everyone's attention. Leica glanced at them, her expression puzzled. She had no idea why the teachers were there. Zik just muttered under his breath, annoyed by their terrible timing. He worried someone might have overheard him. From behind the group, a woman with fiery red hair emerged. Her walk was unhurried, yet it commanded the space around her. An instructor introduced her as a new teacher, starting that very day. Despite her incredibly busy schedule, she had agreed to personally instruct them, an opportunity everyone was told to appreciate. As the red-haired woman drew closer, she extended a hand toward Leica, asking if she was indeed Lady Leica. But a flash of instinct sent Leica leaping backward in an instant. Zik moved to shield her, while Ranges nervously grabbed Zik's arm to hold him back. The woman simply offered a faint smile. complementing Lika's sharp reflexes and the quality of her aura. Zeke's brow furrowed slightly. He hadn't sensed her presence at all. Meanwhile, Rangy's, his voice laced with concern, demanded to know who she was. An instructor at their side then introduced the woman as Lady Freya Finkick of the Black Dragon course. Freya gave a polite greeting. Her gaze swept over the students before landing directly on Zik, calling him by name. When Zik confirmed his identity, Freya wondered if her arrival had caught him off guard. Coolly, Zik replied that nothing about her was particularly surprising. For a moment, Freya seemed frozen. Her focus narrowed as Zeke's eyes glowed softly, as if he were scanning the very air around them. He then remarked that the concealment technique she was using was quite interesting. Freya instantly understood why Balsa, the head of the El Dragon clan, was so invested in this young man. At that same moment, Zik was analyzing the flow of energy within Freya, noticing how her power was focused in her lower body. It moved in a distinct pattern that rendered her steps almost completely silent. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes. He could only imagine what kind of martial art could produce such a graceful, fluid style of movement. After the brief introductions, Freya took charge of the class, announcing she would be their new instructor. Murmurs immediately rippled through the students. The name Freya Finkshook was legendary. They knew her as Tempest Wing, one of the most formidable warriors in the entire Eldragon family. Another instructor solidified her legendary status, revealing that Freed was a 6-star practitioner from the elite Black Dragon Corps, a unit answering only to the head of the family. The students were completely stunned. They couldn't believe someone so powerful would personally train them at the academy. A slight smile played on Freya's lips as she confirmed it, but with a single, non-negotiable condition. Before she would accept anyone, they first had to pass her simple little test. Instantly, the atmosphere became charged with an unspoken tension. She continued calmly, explaining the test was merely a small mission. Their task was to retrieve a crystal identical to the one she held, and survive for 1 full month on the treacherous Poison Dragon Mountain. The moment he heard the name, Rangus's face drained of color, while Zek felt an odd pang of nostalgia. The venomous mountain was notorious as a lethal place filled with toxic creatures. A mere brush with a single leaf was enough to cause an ordinary person to perish. For Zeke, however, this was familiar ground. In his past life, he'd often used that very mountain as his private training sanctuary. Still, he couldn't deny that this trial seemed excessively harsh for such young students. Freya then detailed the rules. Each participant would receive a crystal sphere. If that sphere was to break or get lost, they would be immediately disqualified. A student asked with a shaky voice, "What happens to those who fail?" "What?" Ree answered without a hint of hesitation, declaring they would be permanently cast out of the dragon's nest. She told them not to be overly concerned about the toxins, though. By correctly using the dragon's breath-breathing technique, their bodies could resist the environment. As long as they guarded the crystal and maintained their breathing, their safety was largely in their own hands. Leica chimed in, reminding everyone that beyond poisonous plants, the mountain was also home to dangerous monsters. Freya's gaze turned sharp as a blade. She said the students would have to face those monsters on their own, as hunting was their only source of food. Without the will to fight, they wouldn't even make it a few days. The air in the room grew heavy and cold. One student, Retin, whispered that the mission bordered on impossible. Others began to doubt if their basic striking dragon technique was powerful enough to even scratch the creatures there. Freya offered a cold, reassuring smirk to quell their rising panic. She announced that they had 5 days to prepare themselves. Within that time frame, every student could choose one foundational martial art from the El Dragon family's archives to learn. If they could master it, their chances of survival would climb. But if they couldn't, the consequences were theirs alone to bear. A doubtful student asked if Freya would intervene if a situation became too perilous. The woman met his gaze with a faint, chilling smile and replied icily that in the dragon's nest, the dragon family's domain. There was no room for the weak. Only the strong earned the right to remain. Zeke stood among his classmates who were frozen in silence by Freya's words. His voice cut through the quiet, sharp, and full of pressure. He declared that if they couldn't even overcome a few mere monsters, then they had no business being there at all. Perhaps they were better off trying to get some rest beside the creature's remains on its toxic bed. A chilling unease settled over the area as cold sweat trickled down the pale faces of the students. Ranges looked like he was about to burst into tears while Leah stood silently, lost in her own world of thoughts. Zeke's brow furrowed. He wondered silently, is this truly the same Lagan family I once knew? Everything felt so different from the days when he was the one in charge. That's all, Free concluded, beginning to distribute scrolls detailing martial arts for every weapon type. She invited the students to come forward and select the discipline they wished to master. The trainees immediately swarmed the table. Ranges hesitated, looking completely overwhelmed by the choices before him. Zeke gave his shoulder a light tap, suggesting he go for the spear technique, since he'd already used one during the entrance trials. With a look of immense relief, Ranges nodded quickly and mumbled his thanks. Lika, on the other hand, announced she was choosing a great sword discipline. She felt confident, having already grasped the basics of the lightning great sword form. However, Zeke stopped her, recommending she try the art of the axe instead. Leica gave him a puzzled look and asked why. Zeke explained that an axe would compensate for the remaining weaknesses in her movements. Trusting Zeke's judgment, Leica didn't argue. She simply gave a nod and picked up the scroll he suggested. Once every student had made their selection, Freed checked to see that they had all committed to a path. She regarded them with a calm expression, but her voice was firm as she announced that the next 5 days would shape their futures. Only by completely mastering their chosen art would they have a chance to endure. If they failed, they would face a terrible end on that venomous peak. Just as she was about to leave, Free seemed to remember something. She turned back, adding a warning that the senior students would be trying to take their crystals during the trial. Ranges stared at her, completely baffled by what that meant. Free clarified that the senior students, all 10 years older than them, would be participating in the same trial. Their objective, however, was to hunt the new recruits and seize their crystals. She noted that while the new students had greater numbers and the Poison Dragon Mountain was vast, it was possible they could avoid any confrontations. But don't expect the seniors to hold back, she warned. They will use every method they have to track you down and engage. With that final word, Free turned and departed, leaving Ranges in a state of utter despair. With his face drenched in sweat, he whispered, "What on earth are we supposed to do now? It's not just the toxic creatures we have to worry about. We're also being hunted by students who are way stronger than us." Lika's brow tightened as she added that every senior was at least a 1-star level practitioner. "If a group of them decides to team up against me, that won't last long, and most of the others here probably won't make it either." Zeke gave a slow nod, acknowledging her point. He then suggested that if Leiko wasn't confident in fighting alone, she should form a small team of 2 or 3 people. "Teamwork isn't forbidden," he said. "That way, you can protect each other while hunting creatures and fending off the seniors." Rangjus looked over at him, asking what Zeke's own plan was. With a relaxed look, Zeke replied that he was going to take the trial by himself. "I want to enjoy the challenge," he said with a grin. Leica could only let out a soft sigh. "Of course you are," she murmured. "That sounds exactly like you." Before practice could even begin, Zig suggested they grab a bite first. With that, the trio headed off, leaving the training grounds behind. As they walked, Leah glanced over at Ranges and asked, "Don't you think Zig is a little strange sometimes?" Ranges just shrugged. "Yeah, occasionally." 5 days later, a crowd of students stood anxiously before Poison Dragon Mountain. The atmosphere was thick with a mixture of nerves and determination. Free faced them with a confident grin, declaring the weather was absolutely perfect for starting their trial. So it's finally starting, Rain just muttered, his voice trembling slightly. Even though this was all part of Zig's strategy, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong on Lady Lika's team. Among so many noble-born students, Lika could have chosen absolutely anyone. So why him, someone who hadn't even earned a single star? As he was lost in thought, two others from East Hall, Raymond and Celine, approached him. "We're in the same boat," they said. Celine admitted she was also a commoner and was still in shock that Lika had picked her for the Poison Dragon Mountain trial. Raymond smiled as he looked toward Lika, clearly proud just to be included in her squad. Lika, however, quickly put their worries to rest. She explained that their background had nothing to do with her decision. "I chose you because I see your skills and your true potential," she told them. At her words, Rain just paused, then gripped his spear a little tighter, vowing not to be a liability. Raymond quickly chimed in with the same resolve, promising to meet her expectations. Lika smiled warmly. "I have complete faith in all of you." She then turned her attention to Zig. "Are you seriously planning to take on this trial alone?" Zig simply nodded, looking completely at ease. "I can't wait for the fun to start," he said. Celine, still on edge, confessed her admiration for their courage. While she was nearly trembling with anxiety, Zig was ready to face the entire mountain without a team. Raymond added that it probably made sense, considering the legacy of their families. Lega immediately jumped in, asking them to stop comparing her to Zig, admitting she was just as nervous as they were about the challenge ahead. Zig looked at her, baffled. Is there really a reason to be worried? To him, aside from Lega herself, everyone gathered there looked like a fairly capable group of students, but the rest of the team responded almost in unison that there were countless reasons to be concerned. This trial was no simple matter. Leka then faced Zig again. "Do you truly believe the students I've chosen are highly skilled?" Zig agreed instantly, and from the way he scanned their faces, he recognized that Leka had gathered some of the most promising individuals at the academy. He even praised the team's balance of offensive and defensive strengths. It was as if a month-long exam on Poison Dragon Mountain would be a simple stroll for them. Rangis just swallowed hard, a drop of sweat on his cheek as he watched Zig. That guy had always been impossibly overconfident. Freya's voice then rose above the murmur. "Is everyone present?" She wasn't surprised to see the students already forming groups. Many of them hadn't fully mastered their weapon arts yet, so banding together was a very sensible strategy. Freya stepped forward, announcing the commencement of the trial. "Your mission," she declared, "is to last a full month on Poison Dragon Mountain and guard your crystal ORP." Success meant keeping the crystal intact. Since every ORP was identical, losing yours meant you could simply acquire another from someone else. A nervous energy buzzed through the new students. Zig grinned. So, taking from others was a valid strategy. But Freya wasn't finished. "Once you're settled," she added with a smirk, "our seniors will join the fun to claim your ORPs." The upperclassmen jeered, boasting how easily they'd overwhelm the rookies, who hadn't even earned a single star. That announcement sent a shockwave through the crowd, stirring a potent mix of fear, excitement, and pure adrenaline. After Freya concluded her briefing, she officially started the exam. In a flash, the students surged toward the formidable mountain. Watching them go, Lek turned to Zeke. "You better make it through this." Zeke gave a relaxed smile. "Of course, but you all need to stay safe too." As Lek rallied his team, Freya's eyes landed on Zik. "It's your turn to go in," she said. Zik nodded immediately. "My apologies, I was lost in the moment." Freya gave him a curious look. "You're not nervous at all, are you?" Zik simply offered a calm smile before heading toward the mountain path. Watching him depart, Freya mused that he was truly a one-of-a-kind kid. Later that evening, at the camp outside the mountain, an instructor approached Freya. "Are you sure the new students will manage?" When Freya asked what he meant, The instructor elaborated that the trial seemed far too intense for beginners. Another instructor quickly agreed. He pointed out that most had only been at Dragon's Nest for a couple of months. Many were still below 1-star rank with virtually no real combat experience. They openly wondered who could possibly succeed. Freya remained unconcerned. "There's no need to worry," she assured them. She explained that while the mountain housed venomous creatures, the vast majority were low-level beasts of 1 or 2 stars, posing little real threat. With a cheerful grin, she expressed her confidence in the students' abilities. Then, lowering her voice, she whispered mysteriously, "And I'll be releasing something special eventually." When an instructor questioned her, Freya just smiled sweetly and said it was nothing. She then announced it was time for the seniors to begin their part of the challenge. With determined glints in their eyes, the seniors charged toward the mountain. Their weapons were drawn, and their expressions were sharp. As they vanished into the trees, Freya murmured, "I wonder how many will make it. I can't wait to see the outcome." Meanwhile, deep inside Poison Dragon Mountain, the seniors began their hunt. One group quickly found a lone figure at the base of the mountain. It was Zik, who hadn't seemed to move an inch. They scoffed at the sight. "Is this kid a fool? Why is he just standing there?" A senior took aim with a crossbow and let an arrow fly. But the bolt never reached its target. Z snatched it right out of the air, leaving the seniors completely stunned. With a sharp crack, Zik snapped the arrow in two. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said coolly. "What's that supposed to mean?" one of them demanded. "Forget talking," another yelled. "You saw what he did. We have to move, now." A spark of excitement flashed in Zeke's eyes as he darted forward. A faint smirk played on his lips. "All right," he announced. "Let the games begin." Deep within the mountains, Selena's team was fending off a swarm of venomous creatures. Just as Selene dispatched a massive, toad-like beast, another one lunged from behind her. Raymond instantly threw up his shield, intercepting the blow and saving Selene in the nick of time. With a powerful shove, he sent the creature reeling before finishing it with a final, decisive bash. Watching Rangies effortlessly bring down his own foe, a grin of satisfaction spread across Raymond's face. Lekka praised their teamwork and Ranges gave a grateful nod. But he stopped in his tracks at the sight of the massive pile of toad beasts Lekka had taken down. All by herself, Selene let out a little whistle of amazement. Lekka's power was on a whole other level, just as they'd always suspected. "While we were busy with just a handful," Raymond pointed out, "Lekka cleared out nearly the entire area in no time at all." Lekka just shrugged it off. To her, as a 2-star warrior, these things were barely a warm-up. She also noted that in the week since the trial began, everyone in the group had improved remarkably fast. "Especially you two," she added, nodding at Selene and Raymond. "You've both reached the 1-star rank." Selena agreed. "We couldn't have progressed this quickly without your guidance, Lekka." "Thank you." "She's right," Raymond added with a firm nod. Rangus stayed quiet. He just listened, the gap between him and his newly ranked friends feeling wider than ever, noticing his spirits sink. Selene offered a comforting smile. "You'll get there too, Ranges. Just keep at it." "Yeah, don't give up," Raymond chimed in with encouragement. A small smile returned to Ranges' face. "Thanks, guys. I appreciate it." "Don't sell yourself short," Lekka added. "You just handled 3 frog giants without a star to your name. That's seriously impressive before this trial started. You were training with Zyke and your spear work is way more polished now. It's only a matter of time before you hit your first star." Rangus looked genuinely touched by her confidence in him. As her gaze drifted to the darkening sky, Leia announced, "Night is falling. We need to get back to base, now." Selene nodded. "Agreed. Poison Dragon Mountain is a different beast after dark." On the trail back, Lekka suddenly froze. "What is it?" Rangies asked, but she didn't reply. Her expression hardened as she stared into the shadows near their base. "Who's there?" She called out, "Show yourself!" a figure emerged from behind the tall blades of grass. Celine and Raymond instantly brandished their weapons as Ranjis stood on full alert. The student strolled closer with a sly grin, seemingly unfazed that his presence had been detected. Leica recognized him as an upperclassman and cut straight to the point, asking if he was there to seize their crystal. He confirmed it, and Leica understood that a senior had finally decided to challenge their group. This one, she noted, even had 2 stars. The senior explained that the exam rules compelled them to retrieve crystals from the first-year students. He admitted he hadn't expected his first target to be none other than Lady Leica's team. Leica retorted that a single upperclassman wouldn't be nearly enough to handle her crew. But his smile turned sharp. From the grass behind him, 3 other seniors emerged, each bearing a single star. Their leader scoffed, saying that while Leica might be capable, her companions were merely baggage. The moment his sword was drawn, he ordered them to surrender the crystal and launched a fierce opening attack directly at Leica. Leica dodged it with ease. "Hold formation," she commanded Celine and the others. "I'll take care of their leader." In the meantime, Ranges, who was still without a star, had to fend off the assault of a 1-star senior. His opponent relentlessly taunted him, telling him to give up and hand over the crystal. For a heartbeat, Ranges hesitated, weighing his options. But he vividly recalled the advice Zig had given him when they discussed the power gap between a starless and a stronger foe. Back then, Zig had clarified that against an overwhelmingly powerful opponent, like a 3-star or 4-star, the only logical choice was to retreat, as victory was impossible. However, if the enemy was around the 1-star level, a window of opportunity could appear, provided Ranges focused on finding an opening. Zig insisted that an opening only reveals itself if you endure until the opponent makes a mistake. There was no other path forward but to wait for that precise moment. Zig had once given Ranges a simple breakdown for facing a much stronger adversary. According to him, one could never force an opening while fighting a superior enemy. The sole option was to defend, wait for the opponent to slip up, and then capitalize on their error. If one couldn't even manage that, then defeating a more powerful foe would remain a distant fantasy, especially against someone on Leica's level. Ranges wouldn't stand a chance for long, but facing an ordinary fighter with 2 stars, that possibility should still exist. Zig had also stressed that self-belief was a crucial component of one's ability. His final counsel to Ranges was not to clutter his mind with doubt. There was no need to overthink how to create an opening or dwell on the power difference. Just wait with patience, and when that chance finally came, thrust the spear directly into that vulnerable point. Now, in the thick of the fight, Ranges tightened his grip on his spear. The memory of Zig's instructions surfaced again, urging him to keep defending. He knew he was the weaker one, so his only strategy was to absorb each attack and bide his time. His upperclassman opponent was growing increasingly frustrated that Ranges was still standing. His fury fueled a brutal assault. A fleeting opening was all he needed. Without a second thought, Ranges drove his spear forward with all his might. The upperclassman collapsed. A soft glow then bloomed on Ranges' chest. His first star. Leica saw it happen, a swell of pride and awe rising within her. He did it himself. Nearby, her own opponent was struggling. She couldn't comprehend Leica's overwhelming pressure. They were both 2-star rank, but the gap was immense. Leica knew the secret, the Zart's technique from Zed, and let her channel massive DKI energy into her sword, making each swing devastating. She almost felt sorry for her foe. They just picked a fight with the wrong team. With golden lightning crackling around her blade, Leica ended it in a single, clean strike, leaving her opponent unconscious. With the area secured, she hurried back to her friends to check on them. Relief washed over the group. Everyone was safe. Their first battle against the upperclassmen was a victory. Celine and Rayhand congratulated Ranges on his new power. He just flashed them a brilliant smile. Leah felt a deep sense of calm, now that everyone on the team had their first star. The next one will be easier, she thought confidently. But Even so, a flicker of worry about Zig crossed her mind. Elsewhere on that same mountain, an upperclassman fled in terror. He was trembling, gasping for air, whispering Zek's name like a prayer he wouldn't appear. Other students were also screaming and running, desperate to escape Zok. Just ahead of them, Zig was dragging one defeated student by the collar. Over his other shoulder, he carried a giant serpent he'd easily taken down. He looked like he was having the time of his life, as if it were all a game. The sight completely broke the fleeing students' will to fight. "He's a monster!" one of them gasped, "a demon ... How could a lower-classman hunt them so casually?" One of the runners tripped, his panic reaching a fever pitch. When he looked up, Zig was standing right over him, red eyes glowing faintly. "I'm getting tired of chasing you," Zig said with a sigh. He offered a hand. "Get up. Let's finish this." It was too much for the terrified student. He just went limp and fainted. Zek tilted his head in confusion. He couldn't figure out why his opponent had just passed out. He looked at the others scrambling away and found it bizarrely amusing. "You guys are just sad," he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. He pleaded with them not to leave him all by himself. A moment later, Zig sensed a faint presence drawing near. Without turning, he called out to the figure watching him from afar, when silence was his only reply. He let out a soft chuckle, figuring if the observer wasn't intervening, then what he was doing must be perfectly fine. Zeke announced that he wouldn't be holding back any longer and was ready to resume his little game with the upperclassmen. From the direction of the faint presence, a figure finally emerged from the shadows. It was one of the proctors assigned to monitor the examination. A single drop of sweat trickled down his face as he whispered in utter disbelief at the scene he had just witnessed. He saw with his own two eyes how Zeke had systematically taken down upperclassmen who were supposed to be far superior. More unnerving still, Zeke had sensed his presence despite his meticulous concealment. The realization that this situation was far more significant than anticipated spurred the proctor to make his report immediately. Meanwhile, at the camp just outside Poison Dragon Mountain, Freya was taken aback when several proctors returned to deliver an urgent update. The exam, they reported, had been underway for 1 week. About 30% of the lower-classmen had already given up, while the rest were slowly adapting to the mountain's perils. One proctor noted that they didn't foresee a large number of additional participants dropping out, but when Freya inquired about the condition of the upperclassmen, the proctors exchanged nervous glances. They hesitated to speak until Freya firmly prompted them for the unvarnished truth. Finally, one admitted that the upperclassmen were in constant retreat. Freya's brow furrowed. "What could possibly make them run?" she asked. She stressed that, to her knowledge, there was nothing on Poison Dragon Mountain capable of posing a real threat to them. The proctor clarified they weren't fleeing from a monster. "They're running from Lord Zig." Ree looked skeptical and demanded to know why they would be afraid of Zeke. The proctor took a deep breath before explaining how Zeke had been relentlessly attacking and pursuing the upperclassmen. They had attempted to fight back initially, but were ultimately overwhelmed and chose to flee for their own well-being. Another proctor added, "I'm not even sure what to call him. Based on what I saw, Zig seemed to be genuinely enjoying the hunt, taking down the upperclassmen as if it were all just a delightful game." A different observer nodded in agreement. "He may be the heir of the Eldragon family, but his demeanor and power are anything but normal. He's not just a prodigy. He's more like a monster in human form." Freya absorbed their accounts calmly before speaking in a grave tone. She conceded that she had sensed something different about Zig from the very beginning. Unlike everyone else, he chose to face the challenge alone, appearing completely at ease as he entered Poison Dragon Mountain. It could only mean one thing. Zig had no intention of hiding from the upperclassmen. His plan from the very start was to hunt them down himself. Freya vividly recalled the intense look in Jack's eyes at their first meeting. For the first time, they had to concede. The boy was something else entirely. Suddenly, a strange sound in the distance made one of the observers furrow his brow. A faint smile touched Freya's lips as she said that was exactly what she was waiting for. Not long after, An attendant arrived with a giant cage, asking where they wanted it. Ri told him to set it right there and offered her thanks. The curious observers turned and were stunned by the size of the animal inside the cage. Several of them immediately questioned what kind of creature Freya intended to release. Some even doubted if Freya was truly serious about letting it loose in the mountains. The creature's aura suggested a power level on par with a 3-star beast, which would be a huge risk for the participants. But Freya, looking completely satisfied, calmed them down. She explained that the creature had been modified to only attack individuals with a power level of 2 stars or more. The regular participants wouldn't be seriously hurt. An observer asked why such a powerful creature was suddenly being used in the exam. Ri replied that it was a direct command from the head of their family, Baltza. He wanted to witness the abilities of the boy their own soldiers had started calling a monster. Freya, too, was curious if Zik could hold his own against such a being. With the decision settled, Freya ordered the creature to be released into a poison dragon mountain at dawn. The next morning, deep inside the mountain, Ranjis and his team came to an abrupt halt as a strong tremor shook the earth. Lika frowned, saying that she felt something was terribly wrong. Rayhan guessed that perhaps the upperclassmen were causing the vibration, but Ranjis dismissed the idea, stating it was most likely a beast, possibly a very large angerbark. Even so, Leica couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Within seconds, a second tremor, much stronger than the first, rocked the area, just as a massive tree came crashing down toward them. Lika's instincts took over. She screamed for everyone to move, and the group leaped aside just before the huge trunk slammed into the ground where they had just been standing. When they looked back, Leiho was frozen, finding it hard to believe what she was seeing. Celine gasped, trying to make sense of the massive shape before them, while Rangis's face went pale as sweat trickled down his temple. With a trembling voice, he realized they had to escape immediately, because what stood before them was no ordinary creature, but a colossal golem. Meanwhile, on another side of Poison Dragon Mountain, Zeke sat casually atop a pile of monsters and upperclassmen he had already incapacitated. The exam had grown so quiet that he was losing interest, mainly because the seniors no longer dared to approach him. Even the proctors, who usually watched from afar, were no longer visible, as if they were letting him do whatever he pleased. All of it made the whole exam feel incredibly dull. However, that calm was shattered when Zeke sensed a presence from a different direction. Its aura felt foreign and incredibly strong. A strange energy, far different from the other challengers, pulsed nearby. He first pegged it as a mere 2-star creature, but as he focused, he realized the power signature belonged to a formidable 3-star entity. A beast of that caliber had no business lurking on Poison Dragon Mountain. Zik wondered if the monster had been slumbering there for millennia. He also considered the trouble it would cause for the others, especially Leica, who stood no chance against it alone. The instructors should have cleared the area of such threats before the trial, unless, of course, its presence was a deliberate, hidden part of the test. Whatever the reason, Zik saw its appearance as a golden opportunity. Finally, a worthy adversary to shatter his boredom. Despite the distance, he set off toward the aura, thinking there was no point in waiting when a thrilling challenge awaited. In another part of the mountain, Celine launched the first strike against a golem. Her attack, however, didn't leave so much as a scuff. She stared in disbelief, unable to even scratch its stone hide. Rayond charged next, slamming his shield into the beast with all his might. But with the same result. Nothing they did had any effect, so Lika stepped up, channeling her aura into a bolt of lightning. When she saw a faint scorch mark appear on the golem's arm, she came to a grim conclusion. Only a 2-star combatant like herself could inflict any damage. This meant her 1-star teammates couldn't possibly break through its defenses. "What do we do?" Ranges asked, his voice tight. "Follow my lead," Leica commanded. Her plan was to become the golem's sole target, creating a window for the others to escape. But Rangis immediately refused. "We're not leaving you to fight alone. You'll just be in the way if you stay," Leia insisted. She pointed to the minuscule mark her strongest attack had made. "It's impossible for any one star to contribute to a direct assault." "She's right. We can't hurt it," Rayon admitted. "But we can make sure every one of your attacks hits its mark." As Lekka looked at him, puzzled, Rangis declared, "I'll do whatever it takes not to hold you back." Celine chimed in, "As long as we can create an opening for you, we have a chance to win this." The fierce determination in her friend's eyes brought a small smile to Lekka's face. She finally nodded, accepting their support. "All right, get ready." Leisha gathered lightning and aura into her blade. Meanwhile, Rayhan prepared for defense as Rangis and Selen positioned themselves for the coming offensive. Once Lika's energy was fully concentrated, she gave the signal to launch their coordinated attack on the golem. Lika dashed forward to engage the stone giant, but just as she closed in, the golem swung a massive arm right at her. Rayon leaped to protect Lekka with his shield, but as a 1-star, he struggled to withstand the overwhelming power of the 3-star golem. Seeing him falter, Rangis and Selen charged in from the sides, trying to distract the creature with their own attacks. Meanwhile, Lake moved like a phantom, twisting behind the golem to unleash her attack. With every ounce of her strength, she summoned her signature technique, Heaven Thunder, striking the golem from its blind spot. A colossal explosion ripped through the forest on Poison Dragon Mountain. After Lika's attack sent the golem toppling and the smoke began to clear, the sheer devastation to the landscape became apparent. Rangis was at her side in an instant, his voice filled with concern as he asked if she was all right. Leika managed a nod, confirming she was fine, though every bit of her energy had been utterly depleted. Her thoughts then turned to her friend. "How's Raymond?" she asked. With Selen's steadying arm, Raymond assured her that he too was okay. But just as Leika announced they needed to head back to base, she felt an ominous presence surge from behind them once more. She reacted instantly, shoving Rangis out of harm's way, but took the golem's brutal blow herself as a result. Pinned beneath its weight, she was in utter shock that the creature was still moving. In a flash, she knew she'd let her guard down far too soon after her attack. Selen was equally stunned. How could the golem have survived a full-power assault from Lakey and still be functioning? Rangers immediately charged, aiming his spear to free Leika from the golem's grasp. But the creature was cunning, swinging Leika around and using her as a shield to prevent him from landing a clean hit. As Rangis's fear for Leika's safety reached a fever pitch, a massive tree suddenly came hurtling towards them from out of nowhere. The impact was immense, striking the golem and forcing it to release Leika from its grip. Rangis seized the opportunity, pulling her to her feet and away from the stunned monstrosity. Leika, still dazed, could only wonder what had just happened and how she had possibly escaped. In that moment of confusion, Zek appeared as if from thin air, casually asking about the situation. Upon hearing his voice, Rangis and Linka instantly recognized their incredible friend. But rather than showing any concern for Lika's condition, Zach seemed absolutely thrilled to see the creature. A delighted glint appeared in his eyes. He immediately wanted to know what kind of clay-based monster they were fighting. Just moments before Zach had arrived, he had sensed the golem's presence in a flash of golden lightning. He knew instantly that the aura belonged to Leika and was shocked that her team had been the first to encounter the beast, as Zach had sprinted with all his might. He reflected on how, in his former life, he could have reached the location in a mere instant. Now he was reduced to simply running toward the monster, a fact that he found deeply embarrassing in his current state. He also considered that Leika's group was comprised of immensely talented young people. However, their adversary was a 3-star level monster, and he had no way of knowing how long they could possibly last in such a fight. Suddenly, an idea sparked in his mind. He stopped dead in his tracks, remembering a technique he had recently learned. He swiftly grabbed hold of a giant tree trunk, ripped it clean from the ground, and then channeled his physical power and new technique to hurl it toward the monster. As he watched the tree sail through the air, Zeke remarked to himself that the result of his new skill was quite satisfying. He also confirmed that learning this particular technique had not been a mistake. Given the limitations of his current body, this skill was absolutely essential. The technique was known as the Nurturing Dragon Throwing Arts, which, according to Zach, was from the basic Eldragon combat manual provided for exam preparation. The way of the dragon's growth. It wasn't about flashy moves, but simple, powerful fundamentals. And for Zank, it was absolutely perfect. After all, in his past life, he had been a long-range fighter stuck in a brawler's body. Still, he knew just chucking trees at monsters wasn't going to cut it. Zek darted toward Lekka's position. Ranges, in disbelief, immediately asked if they were okay. "We're fine," Ranges replied, "but that's not our biggest problem." The real issue was the colossal golem they were facing. Zek's eyes lit up. "A golem, huh? So that's what you call this thing?" He mused that it felt strange. He could sense its presence, but there was no spark of life within it. As the golem rose again, it launched a furious strike at Zeke. "Look out!" Laika yelled as Ranges shouted, "It's incredibly dangerous." But despite the golem's devastating punch, Zeke casually caught its fist with one hand. "Not bad," he commented. "This thing's pretty tough." Given the golem's incredible resilience, Zeke realized he'd have to use his aura to get through its defenses. As he effortlessly swatted its next punch away, he sighed that beating it the normal way would just be too boring. Laika let out an exasperated groan. "He's always so reckless," she muttered while Rangius just stared in disbelief. How could Zeke possibly be bored fighting a golem? The very same creature had nearly overwhelmed their entire group. When the golem wound up for another attack, Zek acknowledged its raw power. Even so, he met the blow hand-on, creating a thunderous shockwave that shook the earth. "This area's too risky," Zek announced, holding his ground. "You guys need to fall back." Lika's team didn't hesitate, immediately scrambling for safety. Once they were clear, Zeke gathered his strength and hurled the golem with immense force. As the creature soared through the air, he noted, "Man, that shell is seriously tough." Channeling aura into his fist, he shot forward. "I wonder if it's as hard on the inside," Zeke pondered aloud. Leaping into the air, he shouted, "Only one way to find out." He then unleashed the first form of his dragon destruction art, Burst World. His punch connected with the monster, triggering a massive explosion. His strategy was simple. Instead of slowly chipping away at the golem's armor, he would use Burst World to inject his power directly inside and shatter it from within. As the dust settled and his plan proved successful, Zeke grinned. "Now that's a much more entertaining way to fight." 1 month later, at the main hall of the Eldragon Nation, Zeke looked annoyed, his training having been rudely interrupted. The month-long ordeal at Poison Dragon Mountain had finally and safely concluded. After the unsettling encounter with the 3-star golem, thankfully, no other major incidents occurred. The unforgiving environment had whittled Class 7's numbers down to a mere 30% of what they started with. However, because they were constantly pushed to their limits and faced incredible challenges, every single one of the remaining 30% had achieved a remarkable feat, reaching the 1-star level. Just as the examination wrapped up, Zach found himself unexpectedly summoned by none other than Baltza Eldragon, the Patriarch of the Eldragon family. As they walked through a corridor in the main estate, Zach casually asked, "So, what does the big boss want with me?" Freya's expression soured instantly. "You will refer to him," she corrected sharply, "with the respect he is due. Master Eldragon." Zach just shrugged. "Seems like the same thing to me." For Freya, the reason for the summons was painfully obvious. "Still," she explained, "you're being called because of your actions during the test, a situation you created entirely on your own." When Zach feigned innocence, she affirmed, "Yes, entirely." She elaborated, explaining that the primary goal for the upperclassmen was to challenge the lower-classmen and relieve them of their crystal orbs, but you, a lower-classman, turned the tables and hunted them instead. It was completely unheard of. Freya continued, her tone sharp. And because of your little stunt, not a single upperclassman succeeded in taking an orb from any lowerclassman. As a result, they all have to take the test all over again. Zack countered. Was there a rule that said I couldn't fight back? No one ever thought a lowerclassman would have the audacity to even try, Freya shot back. She let out an exasperated sigh and turned to face him fully. You need to fix that terrible attitude of yours before you stand in front of the master of the Dragon family. Freya warned him one last time to mind his words and demeanor before the master, especially when addressing him directly. But Zack just tilted his head and asked, "Why?" "Because that mouth of yours could put you in a very permanent predicament, regardless of your age," Freya replied grimly. She leaned in closer, her voice low. "I have no desire to witness my own father deliver a final judgment on you because of your arrogance." Unfazed, Zack simply remarked, "If that's the case, Balsa certainly sounds like a tough crowd." When they arrived at a large ornate door, Freya knocked firmly. "Master Eldragon," she announced with formal respect. "I am Freya Wink of the Black Dragon Corps. I have brought the one you summoned." A powerful voice from within responded, "You may enter." As Freya pushed the door open and they stepped into the chamber, she formally presented Zack as instructed by the master. Balsa, who had been focused on some documents, suddenly lifted his gaze, his eyes locking onto Zack with an unnerving intensity. "Tell me why you attacked the upperclassmen during the test." Zack paused for a beat before replying. "Funny, everyone seems to be asking me that same question." Instead of giving a straight answer, he decided to pose a question of his own to his father. "Was I explicitly forbidden from engaging the upperclassmen?" When Balsa prompted him to elaborate, Zack clarified the requirement to pass was to survive for 1 month on Poison Dragon Mountain, while keeping my crystal orb safe. Beyond that, I don't recall any other rules being mentioned. So throughout the test, he just played by the rules and used the time as he saw fit. Zack added that if anything was off limits, it should have been announced before the test even began. Hearing Zeke's bold words, a wave of dread washed over Free. "What are you saying?" she cried out. "How can you speak that way to the masterhead?" Just then, Balsa's eyes narrowed and a terrifying dragon aura exploded from him. The sheer force of it slammed Free to her knees. She felt an overwhelming power, certain it could completely vanquish Zack. But contrary to her fears, Zack stood his ground, utterly unaffected. "Are you quite finished trying to intimidate me?" he asked calmly. "It's becoming a major distraction." Balsa's face flushed, a mix of shock and fury. As Free trembled on the floor, Zack pressed on. "Did you truly summon me just to ask such trivial questions?" Balsa's voice was tight. "How did you accomplish all of that?" Zack feigned innocence. "Accomplish what, father?" Balsa clarified that according to the reports, Zack hadn't just defeated senior classmates, but had also managed to topple a 3-star golem. He then questioned how Zack could stand so calmly before him, even after he'd released such immense pressure. His tone grew serious. Balsa demanded to know how a boy born outside of wedlock could wield such unbelievable strength. A cold smile touched Zika's lips. "The reason is quite simple. It's because I am Zeke." The response made Balsa's brow furrow with irritation. Zeke's gaze sharpened, underscoring his defiant answer. After a tense moment of staring each other down, Balsa finally admitted Zack was every bit as insolent as the reports suggested. And yet, he decided, he would still grant him a prize for his victory over the golem. Balsa informed him he could select a single reward, either one item from the dragon treasury or access to the 2nd floor of the dragon hall. The offer left Free, utterly bewildered. Why was Balsa rewarding this behavior? In Freya's mind, both the dragon hall and its treasury were legendary vaults, holding rare items gathered by the Eldragon family for over 1,000 years. a tradition started by the Patriarch Gilfa's Dragon. The Dragon Hall contained countless books, including forbidden techniques. Meanwhile, the Dragon Treasury housed the heirlooms of past family leaders, from legendary weapons to spirit medicines, artifacts, and relics from forgotten ages. Both locations were fiercely guarded, and very few were ever granted entry. To even reach the second floor, one had to demonstrate an accomplishment of incredible magnitude. Free couldn't fathom it. Even after Zeke showed such profound disrespect, Master Balsa still acknowledged him as exceptional. Zeke then spoke up. "If you're so intent on giving me a prize," he said with a smirk, "why me so stingy? Why can't I have access to both?" But Balsa's decision was final. "You will choose one," he stated flatly, before gesturing for them to leave. But just as they were leaving, Zack pointed a defiant finger at Balsa. "This isn't over," he declared, his voice ringing with unfinished business. Freya, completely exasperated, grabbed Zeke's arm and began dragging him away, chirping. "Receiving a gift from the master's head is a tremendous honor." She tried to smooth things over, assuring Balsa they understood his command and would depart immediately. But as she pulled a reluctant Zik toward the door, he tossed one last cutting remark over his shoulder. "As long as you keep locking away your own heart," Zik called out, "you'll never truly find your strength." It was a challenge, plain and simple. A flicker of surprise crossed Balsi's face as his powerful dragon aura flared, only to be met and calmly neutralized by the steady, immense pressure of Zeke's own divine dragon aura. Long after the two had gone, Zack's father remained lost in thought, pondering the staggering presence he had just felt from his own son. The moment they were out in the main hall, Freya rounded on Zeke. "What in the world were you thinking?" she demanded. "How could you be so utterly insolent to the masterhead? Didn't you hear a single word of my warning before we went in?" Zik casually glanced at her. "What are you talking about?" he said with infuriating calm. "I was holding back as much as I possibly could to be proper in his presence." Freya's jaw dropped. "You call that holding back?" she sputtered. "You're perfectly polite to the instructors, even to me. Why would you show such profound disrespect to the masterhead?" "It's different," Zeke answered simply. "Balsa is my father." Staring at his unique mix of power and personality, Freya could only murmur, "This boy is truly something else." She wondered who he really was. But Zeke just reaffirmed his identity with a mysterious finality that silenced her. Her mind was spinning. Children born of ancient dragon lineage never dared to oppose the masterhead. It was unthinkable, as Balsa held the might of the Dragon King, the apex of all ancient dragons. By all logic, Zeke shouldn't have been able to even stand his ground against his father. This made Freya fiercely curious about the boy who could face the masterhead without a trace of fear. As Freya was lost in her thoughts, Zeke asked, "Is there a problem?" She quickly replied, "No." But inwardly, she made a firm decision. Zeke's origins required a much deeper investigation. Changing the subject, she asked what prize he would choose. She repeated the offer: entry to the Dragon Hall's second floor, or one item from the dragon treasury. He could only have one. When Zeke cheekily asked if he could have both, Freya shot him down with a firm no. Zeke ultimately selected the Dragon Hall, reasoning that knowledge was his greatest need. He considered his situation. He felt out of touch with the current era and was eager to learn about all the new medicines and tools developed over the last 1,000 years. At that moment, Rangis arrived, his eyes wide with excitement. "I can't believe it. We're actually being allowed into the Dragon family's Dragon Hall." Zeke smiled. "Happy?" Rangis nodded enthusiastically. The Strike Dragon Combat arts and the Nurturing Dragon Spear arts were already incredible, he gushed. "And now we get to learn even more powerful techniques from the Dragon Hall." He couldn't believe such a magnificent reward was the prize for passing their test. Not long after, Lake appeared, practically buzzing with energy. She was determined to soak up every bit of knowledge before the clock ran out. She declared her intention to read with everything she had. When Zeke asked if Dragon Hall had some kind of time limit, Leica clarified that even though they were restricted to the first floor, the fundamental rules were the same as the upper levels. Everyone could borrow a single book, but they were free to read as many others as possible within the allotted time. So, how you use your time inside is absolutely crucial, she stressed. Zeke just gave a short, thoughtful nod. Leica then brought up the prize selection, wondering why he'd picked Dragon Hall over the Dragon Treasury. Based on what I've seen of you, I was sure you'd go for the Treasury, she admitted. Zeke confessed that the thought had crossed his mind as well. But right now, he said, information is what I need most. Hearing this, Leica pointed out that the second floor of Dragon Hall housed volumes far more unique than the first, especially concerning combat arts. And from what I've heard, she added, the jump in quality between the first and second floors is immense. Still, she proclaimed with a smirk, I doubt any technique in there could ever top my lightning greatsword. Zeke's intense gaze remained fixed on Dragon Hall, prompting Leica to ask, are you even listening to me? As they finally stood before the grand entrance, the Guardian announced their time limit inside. You have 5 hours. Use them wisely and maintain your composure. Zeke wasn't sure if 5 hours was a blessing or a curse. That's actually quite generous, Leica remarked. Most people only get 2 or 3 hours. She outlined her strategy. First things first, find the one book you want to take with you. Then use every remaining second to devour as many others as you can, Ranges chimed in, mentioning he'd heard tales of gifted individuals who could read multiple books simultaneously. My only goal, though, is to find a combat style that fits me before our time is up. Once they step through the doors of Dragon Hall, Zeke murmured, choosing just one book to borrow is going to be the real challenge here. Meanwhile, Ranges and Selen were still in a state of disbelief, gazing around as they absorbed the true majesty of the legendary hall. Zeke, however, was captivated by a collection of books that dwarfed his wildest expectations. A wide grin spread across his face as he imagined the incredible new knowledge waiting for him. The moment he began to browse and opened a few volumes that caught his interest, it felt like a bolt of lightning struck his mind, leaving him staggered by the information he uncovered. Surrounded by towering stacks of texts, Zeke was completely awestruck by the revelations about rifts, kios, and the nature of magic. It was an avalanche of new concepts. His mind was struggling to keep up. Eventually, Zeke simply collapsed beside the piles of books he'd already consumed. He muttered to himself, the events of the last 1,000 years are utterly terrifying. He couldn't quite wrap his head around how drastically their world had shifted in just a millennium. Worse, their reality was now intersecting with other worlds through the rifts. According to the history he'd just read, it was 900 years ago that the wall between dimensions first fractured with the appearance of a rift. Beyond the rift lay a realm of chaos, a world teeming with strange beasts. In that chaotic dimension, monsters roamed unchecked, but alongside them lived humans, who wielded immense source power, waging an endless battle for survival. When the Eldragon family discovered their existence, an alliance was forged in the fires of countless battles, leading to 4 mighty warrior women from that world joining the Eldragon clan. Their names were Tipina, Favnal, and Liviez, along with Bahamut, and they became the revered founders of the 4 great family branches that exist today. Zeke's mind flashed to the anger burrow he had recently dispatched in the woods, how it was wrapped in a strange black fog, and the electric aura he had just seen surrounding Leica. It dawned on him that he knew absolutely nothing. The mysterious mist and Lee's lightning energy were clearly from that other world, but the thing that truly captivated him was the idea of magic, which seemed less like sorcery and more like some incredible technology they had brought to his world. His eyes shone with pure excitement as he wondered where all the spellbooks were hidden. How had he never stumbled upon a single tome that could teach him about it. Logically, they should have been stored somewhere near the history archives. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the Dragon Hall, startling Zeke and demanding his silence. He whipped his head around, spotting a faint golden aura in a dark corner of the hall. He wondered how he could hear a voice but not sense a single presence. A thought sparked in his mind. Was this more than just a sound? Or was this the very magic he was looking for? A technique that could transmit one's voice without a physical body. Gazing up at the vast ceiling of the Dragon Hall, Zeke confirmed it again. He couldn't feel anyone else there, only the faint source power he'd noticed earlier. Just then, the books before him began to shift. As they floated gently into the air, Zeke stared, utterly astonished, and shouted, "What in the world is happening?" A moment later, however, his eyes lit up as a realization struck him. This was a technique, a way to manipulate objects using threads of source power. "How fascinating!" Zeke exclaimed, his enthusiasm boiling over. When the mysterious voice once more told him to be quiet, Zeke defiantly snatched one of the hovering books from the air and challenged the source. "Show yourself. How can I possibly stay silent when I'm seeing something so incredible?" Yet, the cloaked figure seated on the upper level of the Dragon Hall remained perfectly still. As the source power threads appeared again, Zeke suddenly froze, realizing his entire body was now bound. In the blink of an eye, the cloaked figure launched him toward the first floor, their voice echoing, "Your time here is done." After being hurled out of the hall's massive doors, Zeke tumbled across the ground, skillfully regaining his balance, before sticking a perfect landing. "Well," he declared, "I've just found one more thing I don't understand." As Zeke got to his feet, he couldn't decide if he was annoyed or just completely thrilled by this new discovery. He shouted back at the hall, "You have to show me exactly how those source power threads work." But before he could get another word out, Ranges appeared, looking utterly confused. "What was all that about?" he asked immediately. Leah arrived right behind him, asking Zeke, "What did you do in the Dragon Hall to get yourself thrown out?" Zeke just grinned, admitting he was a little too eager, then shot back, "So, how did it go for you guys? Did you find the manuals and techniques you were hoping for?" Ranges gave an enthusiastic nod. "You bet. I grabbed a spear manual called Cloud Water Arts. I think I've already figured out some of the basics." Celine jumped in, mentioning she'd also learned a few new things on top of borrowing the Windflower Sword Arts book. Raymond added proudly that he was mastering the Eldragon-style Guardian Sword Arts, and that the book he chose was the companion Guardian Shield Arts text. Zeke offered an awkward smile, thinking to himself that every single one of the techniques they'd picked were actually things he'd created for fun in his previous life. When Zeke turned to Leek and asked what he'd chosen, the boy's face lit up as he announced, "I picked Heavy Wave Great Sword Arts by the first Patriarch of the Eldragon family, Gilvas Eldragon. This version has even been revised and upgraded by the 15th family head." Leek went on, "Plus, since I already know our family's own martial arts, I can use this for some serious research." Zeke went quiet for a moment, processing how one of his creations had been updated by the 15th head. It was just like his own Dragon's Breath and Strike Dragon combat arts. He remembered seeing countless books in the Dragon Hall that felt familiar from his old days. But now, almost all of them had an improved version sitting right next to the original. He couldn't help but wonder if this mysterious 15th head was responsible for all of them, which only made him more curious about the man. As Zeke glanced back toward the Dragon Hall, he recalled thinking the place would be dreadfully dull, but now he found himself eagerly awaiting his next chance to go back inside. Time seemed to race by. 5 years later, Leica, while walking down a hall, stopped and wondered where Zeke and Ranges could be. Just then, her classmates appeared, greeting Lady Leica and informing her that Lord Zeke and the others were out on the training grounds. Leica, now a determined 12-year-old, muttered to herself for a moment before thanking her friends. The moment she arrived at the practice field, She saw Ranges, Raymond, and Celine getting ready to launch an attack on Zik, who was also 12 now. Elsewhere, in an office, Balsa received a report about the appearance of a very particular rift. When he asked if the information was reliable, the confirmation came without hesitation. The report was from Ain, the captain of the Black Dragon Corps, who stated that their investigation pointed to an 80% probability of magic water being inside this new phenomenon. Balsa reacted, saying the rift's location was incredibly inconvenient and questioning why, of all the places in their entire territory, the special rift had to appear right there. But they couldn't simply look the other way, not with the high chance of magic water being inside. According to Balsa, anyone who consumes magic water becomes a mage. It alters their very being, granting them a special ability to convert their innate source power into an entirely different energy called mana. He continued his thoughts, noting that the dawn of mana-based magic had introduced incredible new techniques to the world, but it also sparked a relentless and fierce competition over the sources of magic water, which were known as magic springs. In this age, magical springs are the measure of a family's might. The Eldragon clan, however, possesses none. For a family without such a wellspring, their only path to power is conquering special rifts. Their warriors, like Balsa, are few but forged into legends through these brutal conquests. Even so, they are drastically outnumbered by clans blessed with natural springs. This reality makes capturing every single rift their ultimate mission. But Ain's latest report was deeply unsettling. A new rift has awakened in the treacherous, abandoned dragon forest. Tensions have already sparked small clashes along the contested border. The vast forest lies mostly within Eldragon lands, yet a portion of it creeps into the territory of their rivals. The Cerberus family fiercely claims that land, calling it the Great Abundantin Hound Forest. Ain confirmed the rift itself is on their side of the line, but considering its immense scale and position, its powerful domain could easily spill over into Cerberus territory. Knowing that ambitious clan, an invasion from them is not a possibility, but a certainty. Balsa scoffed. Their sharp noses are their only asset. They were bound to sniff it out sooner or later. For this reason, the Eldragon family must prepare for an inevitable confrontation. Their options were few, but they had to move first, before the Cerberus clan realized their advantage. With the choice made, Balsa gave a swift command for Ain to gather the entire dragon cest. He announced the selection trials would commence at once. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, Leek watched in awe as Zek pushed the young prospects past their limits. In the heart of the drill, Zek stood perfectly calm as the three trainees attacked him simultaneously from different sides. His expression hardened as he braced his body, absorbing the full force of their combined blows. Even with the tip of Rangis's spear pressing into his cheek, Zek simply commented on their good coordination. But Rangis, he critiqued, your aggression is smothering the true art of the spear. Rangis was only 11 years old. Zek then advised 12-year-old Celine that her focus on speed made her attacks feel weightless. You must discover a proper balance, he told her. Raymond was also 12. Zek acknowledged his shield work and movements were flawless. However, he stressed, you are far too passive. Learn to become the aggressor. Once more, he commanded them to charge. As Rangis rushed in again, Leek whispered that their training regimen was utterly insane. Insane, you say? Zek called out. Leek clarified that absorbing their attacks without using any source power was complete madness. Zik simply grinned, saying this was the perfect workout for him. He then shouted at the trainees while flexing the powerful muscles beneath his shirt. Watch this, he told Leica, wanting her to see what his training had accomplished. Zik added, thanks to this, my body is now incredibly resilient, even without any enhancements. Could you at least stop attacking while we're talking? Leica protested. But in that instant, Rangis struck from behind with a powerful spear thrust. Rangius declared that Leica should observe his attack closely to understand how truly remarkable Zik's physique was. Leica shut her eyes and held her head, muttering about how they were all completely unhinged. Not only did Zig refuse to use any defensive abilities, but Rangius and the others were relentlessly attacking him with full force. Raymond was astonished. How can he have such incredible defense without using source power? He asked. Meanwhile, Celine called it too mysterious for any ordinary human body to explain. Leica scolded them, telling them not to compare Zeke to a normal person because he was anything but. She then mentioned that the upperclassmen used to call Zik the demon child of Eastern Hall. Upon hearing that, Zik wondered if the title was meant as an insult before asking why Leica had come. Was she planning to join them? Leica replied, "Training can wait. There's something important I need to share first." When Zeke asked what it was, Leica revealed that it seemed they would be meeting the students from the other dragon nests much sooner than anticipated. Rangius looked completely stunned, while Raymond noted that although he expected this to happen eventually, he never thought it would be this soon and that the time to face them had finally arrived. Celine asked, "Is this for the upcoming exam?" And Leica responded that she didn't know the specifics. Z then inquired about the source of her information, and Leah explained she had simply been observing the instructors, their conversations, and their mannerisms. Zeke admitted he never paid attention to things like that. It was a stark contrast to Leica, who was always adept at picking up on gossip and rumors from the instructors. Leica insisted they must remain cautious as West Hall had a particular individual, someone who was a candidate for the next head, alongside herself and Jik. Zig just smiled, remarking that things were finally getting exciting. A few days later, the students of the East Dragon Nest gathered in the arena, including several new faces being introduced for the first time. Zeke noticed that every student had been assembled, regardless of their rank. Lake confirmed his observation, adding that, just as she had predicted, they were about to meet students from another dragon nest. Shortly after, the students fell silent as Freya arrived and immediately commanded them to be quiet. Once all the students were lined up before her, Freya announced that in 3 days, they would engage in a battle against the students from the other dragon nests, also known as the Dragon Halls. The announcement sent a wave of whispers through the assembled students. Many of them couldn't believe they were actually going to face students from other dragon halls. This time, typically battles between students from different dragon halls were reserved for the final graduation trials. They began to wonder why such a battle was being organized so suddenly. Freya explained that while there were several reasons for this decision, she couldn't disclose the details yet. She then added one more thing. The victors of this battle would be assigned a special mission. At the news, Zeke's eyes instantly lit up with a thrill of anticipation. He wondered if Freya's special mission was the chance he'd been waiting for, a challenge that suddenly made things far more interesting. Freya then explained the details. The competition would be a fierce elimination tournament, with 7 champions chosen from each of the East, West, South, and North halls. She also made it clear the students themselves had to decide on their champions, and the selection had to be finalized by the end of the day. An upperclassman voiced his concern. Will the 7 champions be chosen exclusively from the upper classes? Free simply countered, asking why else he thought she would have gathered everyone together. She confirmed that champions would be selected from every level. A few upperclassmen exchanged looks of disbelief, openly questioning how any lower-classmen could possibly stand a chance against students from the other dragon halls. In their minds, it was simple. No first year could ever match a senior because they were all considered hopelessly outmatched. But before leaving, Freya's tone turned sharp. She declared it was their problem to solve and she expected a decision. The moment Freya was gone, the hall erupted. An upperclassman named Rick shot to his feet, shouting for all the underclassmen to pay attention. "Let's be clear," he announced, "the 7 champions will come from our ranks. Does anyone from the lower years have a problem with that?" Lega didn't hesitate. I do, she called out, her voice ringing with defiance against Rick's pronouncement. She insisted they had just as much right to compete and should be part of the selection process. Rick stared at Leica. A condescending smirk spread across his face as he told her she seemed to be missing the point. This is about skill, he scoffed. He added, your noble lineage won't help you in a real fight. Only ability matters here. Leica took a slow, deliberate step toward him. An incredible energy flared around her as 3 brilliant stars materialized in the air. So, ability is the only thing we're discussing when choosing who faces the other dragon halls? She challenged. A wave of shock rippled through the upperclassmen. They couldn't believe Leica had already reached the 3-star level. Rumors had been swirling, with most believing she was only a 2-star, and they began whispering about how she could have progressed so quickly. Leica simply stated that she agreed with Rick. Strength and skill should absolutely be the deciding factors. But then her voice... So tell me, she demanded, are there 7 upperclassmen here who are stronger than me? If not, then the lower years must be included. Rick's face contorted with anger, leaving him speechless for a moment. He finally spat out that the only reason she was so powerful was because of her special heritage. Despite her strength, Rick stubbornly insisted that, aside from Leica, every other underclassman was worthless and couldn't hope to compete with the senior. Just then, Zick's calm voice cut through the tension, remarking that Rick was being awfully loud. Rick whirled on Zick, his fury escalating. What did you just say? As if obliging a simple request, Zick repeated in a mocking tone, I said, you're being loud and incredibly annoying. Pushing Rick's temper to its breaking point, Zick then asked with a cool composure, do you truly believe that every single one of us is weak? Nothing more than refuse in the eyes of an upperclassman? Rick stood stunned as Zick's aura flared to life. Zick issued a bold challenge. A total free-for-all until only 7 remain. That's completely reckless, Leica exclaimed, holding her head. It's too severe, she argued, offering a counterplan. What about an open preliminary round for all contenders? Over the next 3 days, anyone can join, regardless of rank. She looked expectantly at the upperclassmen. That is, if you're as confident as you claim to be. Rick gave a curt nod. Leica's idea stands. A waste of training time, he thought, but so be it. As the seniors departed, Rick glanced towards Leek and Zek. Lek met Z's gaze. So, you're competing? Without a doubt, Z declared, and Ranjus, Saline, and Raymond are joining me. His friends were absolutely speechless. You can't be serious, Ranjus whispered. Against them? Z's expression was pure determination. We've prepared for this. Now is the time to show our strength. Celine groaned. The pressure is unbelievable. Raymond just sighed. If Zed says so, ... then we'll give them the fight of their lives. Looks like my team is making a comeback, Leica said with a smirk. She addressed the crowd. Is anyone else brave enough to join? The lower classmen shrank back in fear. They whispered nervously about facing the elite 3-star seniors. Zek sighed at their lack of spirit. Why the hesitation? He challenged them all with his words. Confronting superior opponents is the fastest way to improve. Besides, he grinned, I want to see what these seniors are truly capable of. The upperclassmen smirked, drawing their weapons. They openly mocked the freshmen's timidity. No amount of practice will save them. One sneered. They don't stand a chance. Rangus and his friends trembled. Perhaps we should go easy on the poor things, an upperclassman taunted. Another laughed. Apart from Lady Lee, the rest are just a bunch of 2-star novices. Z noticed the dread on his friends' faces. What's with the grim looks? Are you afraid? They're all 3-star, Rangus said, his voice shaky. It's natural to be worried. We've spent the last 5 years training for this moment, Z reminded them fiercely. It's time you had faith in your own strength. Celine and Raymond found new resolve in his words. Ranges, however, was still wrestling with his nerves. "Enough talking," one of the seniors shouted impatiently. "Stop wasting our valuable time. We have no interest in you." He ordered the fight to begin, a lesson in hierarchy they were about to learn. But it was over in less than a minute. The crowd could only stare, completely stunned by what they had witnessed. They wondered how the underclassmen had so easily toppled the seniors. Were this year's upperclassmen just a weak batch? Some whispered, but others knew the real story. It wasn't that the seniors were weak. The rookies they faced were absolute monsters. A wide grin spread across Zig's face, thrilled with the outcome as he showered Ranges and the others with praise. He noted how Rangis's deflection and his sharp eye for an opening had improved dramatically. Selen's mastery of the multi-strike Windflower's technique was flawless. And Zig was amazed by Raymond's fluid transitions between his shield and blade. In Zig's view, all their intense training was clearly paying off. If they could build their confidence in real combat, they would become unstoppable. Zig also saw Lika's surging power. Her electric aura could now end a match in a single flash, while the other upperclassmen were still reeling from the sheer speed and ferocity of the match. Lika believed a crushing victory was the only proper response to their arrogance. Rick, however, refused to accept the result. He was utterly convinced that it was impossible. For a 3-star senior to fall to a 2-star underclassman, Zik approached, amused by Rick's stubborn denial in the face of what he'd just seen. He pointed out that age and star rankings were merely suggestions. In a true battle, the stronger fighter wins. If you are weak, you will fall. Rick jabbed a finger at Zik, yelling that stars were the ultimate measure of power, and questioned how Zik couldn't understand something so basic. Zik remained unfazed, then explaining that stars are worthless if your will is broken. Rick fell silent as the true meaning of strength sank in. In a fight, there are only winners and losers. Rick found his voice again, roaring out a challenge to Zik. He puffed out his chest, declaring his senior status made his logic absolute. He claimed he'd been holding back this whole time because they were just children. But Zik's words had pushed him too far. He wasn't holding back anymore. Zik simply replied, "Actions speak louder than words." And just like that, only the two of them remained in the arena. Zik dared Rick to prove that all his boastful pride was backed by actual skill. Seething with rage, Rick charged forward, unleashing his full power. Yet before the attack could land, Zek's eyes flashed gold. A single, precise strike sent Rick flying to the far wall. Zik simply laughed and praised his effort. The entire audience was silent. Rick remained on his knees, motionless. The other students sided with Leica, thinking Zik was insane for complimenting the guy. Rick never even got to display his Dragon Nest training. Meanwhile, in the West Hall arena, students were groaning, nursing the various injuries from their own matches. One observer sighed, dismissing every last one of them as a lost cause. Meet Vanille L. Dragon, a leading candidate to become the next head of the family. A moment later, another student hurried in to report that the selection process was over. Alan Vanilla's right-hand man, a 3-star student, stood beside 3 others who had passed, including a boy named Retin, who was only 12 years old. Vanille immediately summoned Retin, needing to see for himself if a lower classman had truly achieved a 3-star level. When Retin confirmed his rank, Vanille was openly impressed by his skill. He announced his admiration for competent individuals like the young boy. Vanille then declared that if Retin proved useful, he would have a place under his command. Retin bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude and conviction that with Vanille's leadership, West Hall would surely triumph over the others. He was also confident that if their special mission succeeded, Lord Vanille would secure his place as the next family head, making Retin his direct subordinate. Alan stepped forward, informing Vanille that Lady Lake would be participating on the East Hall team. A deep frown creased Vanille's brow. He considered Leica an endless annoyance. Still, he rose to his feet, insisting it was of no consequence. He declared that no matter how talented Leica was, victory was already in their grasp. Vanille repeated his vow. They would win and complete the special mission. Then he would finally prove to his siblings that the leadership of the family was destined to be his. At last, the day of the selection tournament dawned. Inside the immense arena, the chosen students from the 4 dragon nests sat together in their respective groups. The surrounding stands were a chaotic storm of intense gazes, hushed whispers, and tense conversations. The air was heavy, thick with a mixture of raw enthusiasm and crushing pressure. Rangus grew tense as he scanned his surroundings. His shoulders stiffened as he muttered to Lakey that the crowd was far larger than he had anticipated. Leica calmly surveyed the scene and explained, "It's to be expected. Students from every dragon nest are here to witness the tournament." With her eyes narrowed ever so slightly, she added, "Although many faces that should be here are gone now. Those who were eliminated during the trials have vanished from this place, making the number of those who remain feel so much smaller." The gravity of her words struck Rangies all at once. The eliminated students weren't just absent, they were no longer acknowledged. They had been branded as false dragons, the very same fate his father once endured. Rangis's breath caught in his throat, his hands beginning to shake. Leica noticed immediately. Without a word, she gave his back a gentle pat. A silent reminder that, despite the ones who were lost, those of them still standing had to keep moving forward. "We have all grown strong enough to be chosen as representatives for the Eastern Dragon Nest. That fact alone is proof of our worth." Rangis swallowed hard, then nodded with determination, affirming that he would pour everything he had into the coming fight. Behind them, Zek stood with an unnerving calm, his sharp gaze sweeping across the arena. Lekka glanced back at him, a faint smile on her lips. His composure felt strangely out of place amidst the enormous pressure of the tournament. Zek seemed completely unaffected by the tense atmosphere. In his typical flat tone, Zek explained that it was nothing special. "I'm simply observing the other students and assessing their combat skills." Rangies nearly stumbled in shock, muttering to himself that, of course, that was just so typically Zek. Only someone like Zek would treat a selection tournament like a battlefield analysis. As Zig scanned the arena, 2 familiar figures approached from the side. It was Merlin and Rick, upperclassmen from the Eastern Dragon Nest, also selected for the 7-person team. Zig realized both had changed immensely since their last meeting. Rick confessed without hesitation that his previous defeat had been a reality check, forcing him to rethink everything. From that moment forward, he trained with genuine effort, no longer coasting on his title or seniority. As a descendant of the El Dragon bloodline, Rick saw true strength embodied in only 2 people, Leica and Zek. Zik paused for a beat before offering a quiet response, suggesting that as long as Rick understood power came with responsibility, his mindset wasn't wrong. After their talk, Zek's focus snapped back to the arena, where he began to size up the other contestants. Every participant not from the Eastern Dragon Nest was confirmed to be a star-level fighter. But one thing felt off. There wasn't a single 4-star combatant among them. Despite that, Zek detected 3 individuals who radiated a completely different kind of energy. They were fighters hovering right on the threshold of the 4th star. The corner of his mouth curved into a slight smile as he imagined the challenge they would present. While Leica was deep in conversation with Rangies and the others, a presence suddenly materialized right behind her. Someone slung an arm around Leica's shoulder with a relaxed grin, making her startle and tense up. Zek, standing nearby, watched the scene calmly. The girl leaned in, speaking with a breezy familiarity. She remarked that it had been too long and asked how Leica was, hoping no one had been giving her a hard time. Leica quickly diffused the situation, ensuring her friends knew everything was fine. Rangies then cautiously inquired about the newcomer's identity. Leica hesitated for a moment before introducing her as her cousin, Sandy Tuporna, the daughter of the head of the Tuporna family. The name alone was enough to make Rangies saline, and Raymond's eyes widen. The Tuporna family was one of Eldragon's 4 major branch houses. Sandy tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over the group with curiosity before asking who they were. Liga offered a gentle smile and simply called them her friends and classmates. Upon hearing the word friends, Sandy raised an eyebrow, her light tone barely hiding her skepticism. She wondered aloud if they were truly fit to stand beside someone destined to lead the entire clan. Her words instantly caused their expressions to harden. The air grew thick with unspoken tension. Before they could say a word, Zek stepped forward, calmly stating that Sandy would understand their worth once she fought alongside them. Sandy turned to him, a flicker of genuine surprise on her face. Leica took the opportunity to introduce Zace as the other candidate for the role of family head. A spark of recognition flashed in Sandy's eyes, and she mentioned Zek's origins with a sharp, cutting tone. Zek simply listened, his expression unchanging, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. Leica immediately showed her disapproval of Sandy's attitude, but Sandy brushed it off, asserting that regardless of Zeke's status, he was still Leica's rival. In her view, that was all that truly mattered. Surrounding yourself with friends like these will only undermine Leica's position among the other candidates. He even highlighted the fact that none of them had reached 3 stars, as if to question the very standards of the Eastern Dragon Nest. Zeke responded to it all with a perfectly calm and collected tone. He stated that if Sandy continued to look down on them, she would eventually be caught completely off guard. Sandy's expression changed in an instant. In a cold voice, Sandy reminded him that Zik was just an outcast with no family support or power. Behind him, in her view, the only thing Zik possessed was the lineage of the family head. Nothing more than that. Sandy stepped closer, confronting Zik openly with a sharp, provocative move. She pointed right at him, questioning if he really had the audacity to speak so casually in her presence. Zik remained calm and answered flatly that his words were simply a piece of advice. That response only fueled Sandy's temper further. Her face tensed with frustration, while her aura began to seep out bit by bit. Before the situation could escalate, a figure intervened between them. The sudden interruption made Sandy freeze. The person standing in the middle was Aegis Vanblade, the representative of the Northern Dragon Nest. With a composed attitude, he positioned himself between Sandy and Zik, reminding them that this was not the place to start a fight between teams. Aegis glanced at Zik. Despite facing 2 powerful representatives, Zik's expression remained utterly unchanged. It was as if the tension building around him meant nothing at all. Sandy clicked her tongue and told Aegis to move aside, declaring that she was handling important business. Aegis simply smiled casually and replied that he couldn't just ignore the situation, especially since the selection tournament was about to start. Around the arena, students from all the dragon nests were whispering among themselves. Suddenly, an authoritative voice cut through the commotion. The sound of his voice alone was enough to bring the entire arena to a dead silence. Rangis and the others were frozen in place. The man who spoke stepped forward and announced that the long-awaited selection tournament was finally set to begin. Hearing that announcement, the corner of Zeke's mouth lifted into a confident smirk. The man standing before them was Mentric, captain of the Gold Dragon Corps, a figure known throughout the academy as a truly terrifying instructor. Mentric strode forward and raised his voice, ensuring all eyes were on him. He explained that the selection battles would follow a tournament elimination format, combining all 4 halls. The 4 halls would be split into 2 groups. The winners from each of those groups would then meet in the final round. The combat system was strictly one-on-one. Each hall would send out 1 fighter in rotation, following a sequence decided upon before the matches began. Out of 7 participants for each pavilion, the first team to defeat 4 opponents would be declared the winner, while the remaining results would decide first and second place. Wintrick emphasized one critical rule. Once the competition has started, the fighting order cannot be altered for any reason. The chosen sequence is considered an integral part of each hall's strategy. With that, he moved on to his final point. The champions of this tournament will be chosen for a special mission. The word special mission brought a faint smile to Zeke's lips. More than anything else, a true mission was the only thing that could ever spark his interest. Mentric declared this mission was of the highest importance to the Elt Dragon family. Anyone who participated would be making a huge contribution to their legacy. Lika's expression hardened with resolve, while a confident smirk played on Vanille Favnir's face. They both knew exactly what this meant. Contributing to a mission like this was a direct path to claiming the family's leadership. With the stakes set, Mentric announced the start of the tournament pairings. He called for a representative from each hall to come forward and draw a stone from a box, deciding their first opponent. When West Hall was summoned, Vanille Favnir strode forward, picked his stone, and returned to his spot with a nod from Mentric. Just seeing Vanille up close made Leica tense almost imperceptibly. Vanille shot her a look, a mocking smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Noticing her reaction, Zek quietly asked if she knew him. "That's him," Leica murmured. "The one I told you about from West Hall, a top contender to lead the dragon family." The name earned a small, knowing smile from Zek. As he scanned the West Hall lineup, he realized Vanille wasn't the only threat. Their entire hall was filled with formidable fighters. The other halls were skilled, sure, but the difference in power was stark. Everyone in the arena could feel the chasm between West Hall and the rest. Zek's gaze then landed on a familiar face within Vanille's group. He recognized him instantly. It had been quite a while. His mind flashed back to the entrance exam where Retten's talent had been undeniable. To have reached the 3-star level already meant Retten's training had been relentless. It was a dedication even Zek had to respect. Across the way, Reten also spotted Ranges and his jaw tightened. He couldn't figure out what Ranges was even doing here. Some of Retten's followers didn't hold back, jeering from the stands. Their taunts echoed loudly, questioning how a so-called failure like Ranges had made it this far. The insults made Ranges flinch. Rehand, standing beside him, gently asked, "You okay?" "I'm fine," Ranges clipped out, but the weight of their scorn was heavy. Retten's intense glare bore down on him, a crushing pressure that was hard to ignore. Until Mentric called for the representative from North Hall. At the summons, Aegis Van Blyde stepped into the arena. He drew his lot swiftly. Mentric immediately called for South Hall. A girl with striking purple hair walked up, chose her stone with an air of confidence, and rejoined her team. Finally, it was East Hall's turn. Leek looked directly at Zeke. "You're up." Zeke paused, asking why she'd chosen him. Leek's answer was simple and blunt. "Because you're the strongest one we have." Zig attempted a half-hearted protest. He mumbled something about the younger fighters usually going first. Leek gave him a look. "We're the same age, genius. Now, get moving." From a distance, Sandy. Tuporna's voice cut through the air. "Leica, why are you sending him instead of me?" Leek's answer was sharp and immediate. "Because Zeke is East Hall's the strongest." Sandy let out a derisive laugh. "That's a joke. He hasn't even hit the 3-star level." He declared that this tournament was meant to be a showdown between the Faniel family candidates and Leica. Before he could continue his rant, Leica cut him off. With a calm demeanor, she announced that East Hall was doing just fine as it was. A slight, knowing smile touched Leica's lips, radiating absolute faith in her team's power. After every representative had chosen a stone, Mentric instructed them to pour their source power into the objects. One by one, they began to hum with light. The outcome became clear in moments, and Mentric announced the pairings. The opening contest would be East Hall against North Hall. Following that, West Hall would face South Hall, prompting the North Hall members to prepare. Among them stood Sandy, and next to him, a colossal young man practically bursting with muscle. His sheer presence was an immense weight in the air. Seeing him, Ranges tensed and whispered to Leica, "Is that guy seriously a student?" Leia gave a slow nod to confirm. Yet a shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. She had not anticipated facing her own cousin in the very first round. In stark contrast to Leek, Sandy unleashed his energy without hesitation. This was the perfect moment, an opportunity to give Leica a harsh reminder. His voice boomed with authority. I'm going to completely overwhelm you, Le. So you remember your place and your purpose. In reply, Leah let her own brilliant aura flare to life. Her gaze was unyielding as she readied herself for the confrontation. Close by, Aegis glanced at Z with a spark of intrigue. I am genuinely anticipating our match. Z flashed a relaxed grin in return. Something tells me we'll get along. I'm looking forward to it too. As the two stood together, their stones pulsing with light, Zeke's smile sharpened. He was truly relishing the fight to come. Vanille Favnir sat calmly amidst the other students, watching the arena with an unreadable expression as the South Hall team observed with equal focus, cataloging every flicker of emotion from the other halls. Shortly after, a new announcement reverberated through the arena. The first match of the selection tournament is East Hall versus North Hall. Both sides instantly grew taut with tension as they prepared to send out their first fighters. Rick clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles were white. I have to win this, he murmured, no matter what it takes. La shot him a worried glance, then quietly asked, G, do you think Rick's going to be okay? He seems incredibly nervous. Zeke nodded, his expression showing he fully understood her unease. Instructor Mentrick raised a hand, signaling the fighters to advance. The arena fell silent as Rick stepped into place, facing his opponent from North Hall. With a sharp gesture from Manrick, the match officially began. Rick let out a fierce cry as energy gathered in his fists. Sheer determination blazed in his eyes. Zik remarked calmly, Well, we're about to see how this plays out. Leah observed that Rick seemed a bit unsteady, concluding this wouldn't be an easy fight. She asked, You sense that too, don't you, Zik? Zik replied flatly, in a true conflict, nothing is ever certain. However, his expression shifted slightly as he added that this particular rule didn't apply to him, because every time he fought, he ensured victory was the only outcome. Leah quickly clarified that she wasn't talking about Zik. Ignoring her, Zik kept his focus entirely on the unfolding match. He judged that in terms of pure skill, the North Hall fighter was on a similar level as Rick. If Rick stuck to his usual fighting style, a win should still be within his grasp. Lek gently shook her head. She pointed out that this was Rick's first time competing before such a huge crowd, while also shouldering the honor of East Hall. That kind of pressure could easily affect his performance. Zik acknowledged her point was valid, but added that the opponent was under the same strain. Zik's gaze then drifted elsewhere. He mentioned that Sandy Toporna and Aegis Fanblade were the exceptions, and Leek felt it as well. The imposing presence they both radiated was undeniable. Zik explained they were on the cusp of the 4-star level. Consequently, the pressure from the audience meant almost nothing to fighters of their caliber. A loud crash echoed in the arena as Rick was thrown back, hitting the ground hard. The first match concluded with a win for North Hall, leaving Rick powerless on the arena floor. Seeing the outcome, Merlin grew anxious, fired up with a resolve to claim victory in the second round. Leek tried to soothe him, insisting that everything would be fine. Yet the result of the second match was no different. North Hall claimed another victory. Rick and Merlin came forward to apologize to Zik for their defeats. Zik just smiled calmly and explained that the intense atmosphere of the arena had simply overwhelmed them. Both of them nodded. Zik urged them not to get lost in the setback. He stressed that if this were a genuine battlefield, where a single moment determined survival, the outcome could have been vastly different. This arena was a place for learning, not a proving ground for finality. He believed their loss today would serve as a crucial lesson for real combat in the future. Hearing that, Rick and Merlin's determination returned stronger than before. Zik then highlighted that 2 losses in a row made the next fight absolutely critical. He turned toward Ranges, his expression surprisingly cheerful. Ranges panicked instantly, pleading, Please don't add any more pressure. I've been a nervous wreck since this morning. Besides, my opponent is that intimidating senior from Halen. Overcome with fear, he started to cry, grabbing onto Zik. Zik calmly reminded him, You faced this person before, during the team selection. Ranges, still trembling, insisted there was no one that formidable in East Hall. Terrified at the thought of facing him now, the sheer number of eyes on him was crushing. Zig took a slow, deliberate breath. He realized Ranges needed a different kind of encouragement. With a soft laugh, Zig clapped him on the shoulder, turning his attention back to his opponent. "Just focus on one thing," he whispered, that sword in his hand. Zig reminded him that he was just facing a person holding a weapon. If the blade lunges, you sidestep. If it lifts for a slash, you retreat. If he lowers his guard, you advance. Nothing else matters. Just react to the sword like you always do. Ranges listened, his focus sharpening. Slowly, a glimmer of his usual confidence returned to his face. "I'll handle it my way," he affirmed. Seeing this, Jia couldn't help but smile. Ranges had incredible focus. All he needed was a clear target. Once he could tap into that instinctively, Zach knew Ranges would reach a whole new level of skill. From the crowd, a few students started to heckle, pointing out the size difference. "Someone that scrawny doesn't have a prayer?" one of them sneered. Ranges sent them a look so sharp it could cut stone. The jeers died instantly. At that very moment, Instructor Mentrick's voice boomed, "Begin!" drawing all eyes back to the arena. As the match started, Ranges' rival lunged with a surprise attack. He activated his three-blade sword technique, unleashing a blindingly fast slash. The sword whistled through the air, but Ranges evaded it with effortless grace. The attack met nothing but air. His opponent, now furious, shouted a curse and activated the same technique again, this time pressing forward with even greater force. Ranges met the assault with ease, not a hint of panic on his face. Lika tensed, her worry plain to see. Ranges' friends recognized that the fight was moving into the exact range where he was most formidable. Still, a wave of nervousness spread through them. Zek remained perfectly calm. "Watch his eyes," he told them. Rangis's gaze was locked on his adversary, a faint blue light beginning to glow as the barrage continued. He dodged every single slash with flawless precision. Frustration twisted the opponent's face. He unleashed his ultimate move, the three-blade chaos three-leaf dance. In that instant, the light in Rangis's eyes blazed. He countered with his cloud and water spear technique, with movements as fluid as drifting clouds and flowing water. He completely dismantled the attack, leaving his opponent frozen mid-motion, giving him no time to recover. Rangdus immediately launched his own technique, Raging Flood. His spear shot forward with incredible momentum, striking his opponent squarely in the chest. The impact was decisive. The boy was thrown backward, collapsing in a heap. Instructor Mentrick rushed into the arena, calling the end of the match and declaring victory for East Hall. Ranges let out a long breath, a tired smile forming on his face. At his side, Zig was beaming. "This," he said with quiet confidence, "is the real turning point." The entire tide of the competition had just shifted. Ranges' victory put East Hall right back in the fight. Shortly after, Celine claimed the fourth round with a decisive win. The fifth match concluded just like the ones before. And Raymond's victory cast a heavy silence over North Hall. East Hall was now just one win away from sealing their triumph. The final showdown was inevitable. Lex strode forward, meeting Sandy Tuporna in the heart of the arena. "It's been a while," Leek remarked, his voice deceptively calm. For Sandy, the stakes were sky high. North Hall needed a miraculous comeback with 2 straight victories. This single contest would determine the final outcome. 2 heirs of the same family, both wielders of the Thunder Technic. Sandy studied his cousin for a long moment before speaking. "I honestly never expected North Hall's elite to crumble." "I did warn you," Leek replied evenly. "My hall isn't a pushover." Sandy gave a slight nod. "I see now that I underestimated your companions." However, he added, "none of that is relevant anymore." A storm of lightning mana suddenly crackled to life, erupting around his body. The real issue was never your teammates, Sandy declared. To become the head of the El Dragon family, what's required is absolute, unrivaled individual power, he stated with conviction, and you simply don't have what it takes to defeat me. After all, Sandy pressed, you're merely the second representative for East Hall. Do you truly comprehend what's on the line with that position? Leek's gaze flickered toward Zig for an instant before locking back onto Sandy. His response was unwavering. I understand everything perfectly. My ambition to lead this family has never faded, Leek announced. Even if my opponent is you, my own cousin, I am confident that I will be the one to emerge victorious. Lifting his blade, Leek aimed it directly at Sandy. This time will be different. Sandy's eyes narrowed. Then prove it, he whispered, before vanishing in a heartbeat. Shocked gasps echoed from the students as lightning tore through the air. Sandy materialized directly behind Leek. Let's see this power of yours, he challenged, his sword descending in a brilliant arc. Leek's response was instantaneous. He met the powerful strike head-on with his own blade. The colossal impact sent tremors through the arena. Wild energy flared as Leek's feet dug into the earth to withstand the overwhelming force of the collision. Even so, Leek held his ground, but Sandy gave him no time to recover. A second slash followed, immensely faster and heavier than the first, causing Sandy's own eyes to widen in surprise. It was as if he were striking at a phantom. From the edge of the arena, Aegis Vanblade observed the clash with detached calm. Just as I suspected, he murmured to himself. Sandy clearly holds the advantage. He was battling a rival whose command of the Great Thunder's sword technique was far more polished than Leek's. The only question was how long Leek could hold out, and Sandy was about to provide the answer. A blinding light gathered around his sword as he unleashed the Thunder Spirit Great Sword Art. The attack shot forward with terrifying precision, moving faster than the eye could possibly track. Leek's attempt to deflect it wasn't enough. A flash of searing light broke through his guard, and his body was thrown back, crashing hard against the arena floor. Ellen and Merlin gasped in shock. Sprawled on the ground, Leica gritted her teeth, forcing herself to remain calm. The injury wasn't as bad as it looked. Panicking now would be a mistake. She took a slow, steadying breath and prepared to get back on her feet. Not far away, a conversation unfolded. This level of pressure is too dangerous for her, Ranjis muttered, his voice laced with worry. She's been training with Sandy since they were kids, Rayon replied, his tone even. This is hardly the first time she's had to face her cousin's overwhelming power. As Leica pushed herself up for a moment, she looked just like her younger self, headstrong and absolutely refusing to back down. She moved forward, dodging every one of Sandy's attacks with the smallest possible motion. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. You still have the same awful habit, you know, he commented coolly. The second you get emotional, your stability crumbles. In response, Lake activated her Thunder Flash /. Arcs of lightning wrapped around her, supercharging her every movement. Sandy immediately countered with his own scattered thunder, and the two attacks clashed violently. A massive lightning explosion tore through the arena, cracking the floor and causing the ground beneath them to collapse. The air itself seemed to howl as shards of rock were sent flying in every direction. Lake staggered under the incredible force, and Sandy stood over her. His gaze was frigid as he said, "Everything is going exactly as I expected. That useless habit of yours has never changed." He then added, "You don't even deserve to be called the strongest in the East Hall. If you had just chosen the North Hall from the beginning," Sandy continued, "you could have avoided all this humiliation." Though her body screamed with exhaustion, Lekka forced herself to stand tall. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "I can still win," she insisted. Sandy just stared at her coldly and told her to give up. "You will never defeat me in your current state," he stated bluntly. "If this was always going to be the outcome," Sandy added, "you should have gone to your father from the very start. He should have arranged for you to enter the North Hall, even if he had to force you." But even after hearing all that, Leica simply got back on her feet to face him again. Sandy clicked his tongue in irritation. You really haven't changed at all. Stubborn until the very end. If that's how you want it, he said, then I'll just have to teach you a proper lesson. In the blink of an eye, Sandy disappeared. Before Leica could even fully register it, he reappeared directly behind her. It's over now, he announced, his voice chillingly calm. Leica tried to summon her remaining power, but a lightning-infused kick from Sandy slammed into her stomach first. The impact was devastating. Her body folded in on itself as a searing bolt of lightning raked across her side. Leica was sent flying, crashing hard against the arena floor with a sickening thud. But Sandy wasn't done yet. He launched himself high into the air. A tempest of lightning swirled around his sword as he prepared his next technique. From the sidelines, Celine and Rangus watched aghast, before instinctively turning to look at Zek. One of Leica's barriers is about to shatter, Shizek stated with an unnerving calm. Rangus didn't understand what he meant. Down below, Sandy pointed his sword at Leica, ordering her to stop struggling and surrender. This, he declared, is the end, as he prepared to unleash the true power of the Great Thunder Sword technique. A bolt of lightning crashed down, shaking the arena to its core. The very ground shattered from the overwhelming force. A thunderous crash sent debris flying, stunning the crowd into silence. To many students, the outcome was already decided. As the blinding light receded, Sandy stood resolute, looking down at Les' still form. For a moment, she was frozen. Then, slowly, Leah began to push herself up. She was battered and bruised, her breathing ragged, but she got to her feet. Leah met Sandy's eyes, recognizing her sister's own Great Thunder Sword technique. Despite her injuries, a faint smile appeared. She admitted the technique was truly remarkable. Sandy stared back in complete disbelief, muttering that the last strike should have been more than enough to end it. Leah replied calmly that years ago, an attack like that would have surely taken her down. But she too had spent the last 5 years training without pause. With a quiet resolve and a small smile, Leah declared that this fight was far from over. The scene flashed back to the moments just before the match began. From the start, an unease had settled over Leah. Zik asked what was wrong, pointing out that she looked unusually tense. Leah paused before confessing the simple yet heavy reason. Her opponent was none other than her own older sister, Sandy. Zik didn't immediately grasp why that weighed so heavily on her. So, Leah explained further. She revealed that Sandy was the one who had taught her the Great Thunder Sword technique. While she learned the basics from her uncle, the family head, it was Sandy who had truly shaped her understanding of it. That made Sandy more than an opponent. She was Leah's mentor, the very measure of her strength, and a barrier she had never once been able to break through. Leah admitted she had never, not even once, managed to defeat Sandy. Understanding finally dawned on Zeke. With a slight grin, he gestured to himself, reminding her of all their training sessions. He told her to think of the endless days they had sparred, and how many times he had sent her to the ground. As the memories returned of her being relentlessly struck down, Leah's eyes suddenly welled up. Zeke chuckled softly, asking if it truly bothered her that much. He then explained that Leah had always had one major flaw. Whenever her emotions ran high, her vision would tunnel and she'd lose sight of the battlefield. That's why their training for the past 5 years had focused on maintaining a cool and lucid mind, even in the heart of the most ferocious battle. Zeke gestured toward Sandy, telling Leah that this was her moment. Just as they had practiced, she needed to observe, to absorb, and to meticulously analyze her opponent's Great Thunder Sword technique. In doing so, she wouldn't just be fighting her sister. She'd be on the path to surpassing her. Back in the present, Leah finally spoke, her voice filled with conviction. She announced she'd now had a front row seat to observe Sandy's Great Thunder Sword technique. She had taken the full force of it, studied its every nuance, and through it all, she was finally beginning to see a way forward. The words were a puzzle, and Sandy couldn't piece them together. Before she could even ask, Lika lunged forward. Sandy's eyes widened. Something was wrong. Hika's swordplay felt different. For a fraction of a second, Sandy couldn't tell if her sister's attack had slowed or just stopped completely. Lazia exploited that sliver of confusion, closing the distance in a flash. Sandy cried out, but her sister moved relentlessly, unleashing the needle of thunder. Lightning erupted at point-blank range, slamming into Sandy with overwhelming force and throwing her backward. But Leica wasn't finished. She leaped into the air, already preparing her next move. Struggling to find her footing, Sandy couldn't process what had just happened. She demanded an answer, shouting about how Leica's style had transformed so impossibly fast. From above, Leica executed the thunder flash, her blade carving a sharp arc of pure lightning. As she descended, she called out her secret. It was all about changing the rhythm, a skill that had always been Sandy's greatest strength and Leica's biggest weakness. But now she finally understood it. All that was left was to put it into practice. Sandy shot back a warning, insisting that just understanding a concept didn't mean you could instantly master it. The battlefield, however, told a different story. From the sidelines, Ranjis and Selin were screaming encouragement for Leica. Selin yelled that Leica's movements were on a whole different level. Zig watched it all unfold with a satisfied grin. He remarked that facing an opponent with the exact same style teaches you more than any training session ever could. Rick quietly asked if Zig truly understood how Leica had improved so suddenly. Zig confirmed that Leica had just mastered her sister's great thunder technique. Right in the middle of the fight, he explained it was the culmination of their training to calmly absorb an opponent's technique while facing it head-on. Rick and Raymond listened in stunned silence. Zig went on, saying that Leica always used to fight with too much emotion. Her focus would narrow, leaving her no room to adapt. She could only see her own blade. But the Leica standing there now was different. She was calm enough to actually see her opponent, even in the heat of battle. By facing a mirror image of her own style, her understanding had leaped to a whole new plane. Back in the arena, Sandy pushed herself upright, declaring the fight was far from over. She insisted that a technique learned on the fly would never be enough to defeat her. Leica's only response was to ready her stance. The two sisters clashed once more. A brilliant flash of lightning erupted from the center of the ring. Waves of energy crashed against the protective barrier as Sandy was again forced back. Disbelief twisted her face. She screamed that she couldn't possibly be losing a contest of pure power. Stepping forward, Leica stated calmly that when it came to physical conditioning, she hadn't slacked off either. She mentioned someone had trained her to the point of utter collapse. Leia raised her sword. "Now watch this," she told her sister. With a piercing cry, she unleashed the celestial heavenly thunder sword technique. A tempest of lightning raged, spinning wildly across the arena. The ground buckled under the immense force as Sandy was engulfed by the brilliant storm. When the glare finally subsided, Leica stood panting, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Sandy stumbled, his balance completely gone. Offering a faint smile, he admitted his little sister had grown incredibly strong, then collapsed onto the arena floor. A hush fell over the crowd, broken moments later by a clear, resounding announcement. The winner is East Hall. From the sidelines, Faniel Favnir, the West Hall's champion, stared at the stage in utter disbelief. Beside him, Alan noted his expression and asked quietly, "Is something the matter?" Faniel offered no reply. As Liam made her way back to her team, Zake was the first to speak. He declared it an incredible fight, yet beneath his praise was an unmistakable note of disappointment. Clearly wishing for his own chance to battle, Celine rushed to support Lake, who smiled weakly and said she was just glad the match was decided. On her turn, leaning on Selin, Liam mused that if she had somehow lost, Zig's next opponent would have been Aegis Van Flight. Zig asked, "Do you know him personally?" "Not directly," Leica replied. But everyone knows his reputation. She explained that Aegis was hailed as the greatest prodigy the Vanblade family had ever produced. Hearing this, Zig privately conceded that from what he'd seen, Aegis truly seemed to be in a league of his own, even among the tournament's elite. Lika glanced toward Aegis and confessed that even with Zig's power, she couldn't predict the outcome. Just then, Mentric entered the arena, announcing that while East Hall's victory was secure, all remaining matches would be fought to their conclusion. The news caught Ranjis completely off guard. Zik wondered aloud what the point of such a decision was. Merlin shared his confusion, noting the tournament should have ended after 4 opponents were down. The ruling felt odd to Zeke as well. Suddenly, their true objective became crystal clear in his mind. They wanted a spectacle, Zig versus Aegis Fanblade. Even so, he decided it didn't really matter. With a calm smile, Zig said that as long as he got to fight, he was content. Across the field, Aegis Fanblade was already preparing. That the clash everyone had been waiting for was now unavoidable. Aegis called out, saying that even though North Hall had already lost, he was thrilled to finally face Zigasi. A flicker of surprise crossed Zig's face, as he questioned if Aegis had wanted to fight him all along. Of course, Aegis confirmed without hesitation. He elaborated that Z was East Hall's chosen representative. Even with someone as powerful as Leek on the team, the choice had been Z. That decision alone was enough to spark his curiosity. Aegis wanted to discover who Zik truly was, especially noting that he carried the bloodline of the family head. From his observation, Zik was still merely a 2-star fighter, and yet, despite that, he had been selected to represent the Hall instead of Liek. Aegis declared that this very contradiction was what made him so eager to cross swords with Zek. Zeke paused for a moment before replying, "Just as I thought. This is going to be a perfect match," he admitted. "Honestly, I've been waiting for this showdown." Aegis let out a soft laugh. "Getting fired up, are we?" "This place is full of strong fighters," Zeke answered, "but you're the one who really stands out." He went on, "You're known everywhere. The once-in-a-century prodigy from the Vanblade family. It's only natural I'd want to challenge someone like that," he reasoned. Aegis slowly raised his katana, his gaze becoming incredibly sharp. "I like your attitude, Zeke," he said, his own excitement growing. "This is getting good." As he stared at the blade, Zeke realized it had been ages since he'd encountered a weapon with such a potent aura. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, declaring the start of the 7th match. In a heartbeat, Aegis vanished from his spot and lunged forward. Zeke was genuinely startled. With a single step, the entire distance between them was gone. A slight smile played on his lips. Closing a gap like that in one move, Zeke remarked, "That's some incredible footwork." Aegis drew his katana in a single, fluid motion, unleashing his 1,000-leaf flash, and a brilliant golden light exploded across the arena. As the blade descended upon him, Zeke felt a strange disturbance. The entire presence of the attack simply vanished, yet the katana was now just inches from him. Zeke calmly assessed that he could still evade it. The blade seemed to slice him in two, but a moment later, Aegis's eyes widened in shock. Zeke stood beside him without a single scratch, as if he had never been in the attack's path to begin with. Aegis instantly understood he'd been tricked by an illusion. At that very instant, Zeke spun around. He'd confirmed the strike did hit something, just not where Aegis thought he was. A grin spread across Zeke's face as he acknowledged the clever exchange. "That was a seriously impressive move," he called out. "Show me what else you've got." "An ability like that is exactly what I'd expect from you," Aegis shot back. He stepped forward without a hint of hesitation, shifting his stance to unleash another technique, the 1,000-blade, style wavy leaf. As his katana moved, a powerful energy flowed with it. The strike was like water fluid, relentless, and its path was impossible to predict. The attack rolled in like a great wave. Zeke dodged it with a confident smile. He knew that reading an attack that flows like water was infinitely harder than a simple, straight thrust. Even so, he was already starting to absorb the rhythm of the movements. In a flash, Zeke launched himself high into the air. The flowing blade couldn't follow, its pressure dissipating as it passed harmlessly beneath him. With a bright expression, Zeke called down, "Hey, that technique's not half bad." Though Zeke had no plans to get hit, Aegis wasn't about to stop. Lightning began to crackle around his katana as he prepared his brilliant billion lightning. Zeke evaded again, his eyes narrowing in focus. He recognized that the blade's trajectory was now nearly impossible to read. This attack wasn't just fast, it was designed to completely shatter his timing. As the duel unfolded, Zeke noticed how Aegis's form seemed to flow and shift with every single move. Despite this fluidity, his speed and strength remained perfectly controlled. The true power of his blade was its sheer efficiency and a wasted motion, no excess energy. Each strike was flawlessly timed to Zeke's own breath and rhythm. A sharp hiss echoed as the katana's tip grazed Zeke's shirt, tearing the fabric cleanly without ever touching his skin. Zeke silently acknowledged that such masterful control could only be born from relentless practice. "Now this is something else," he murmured almost to himself. His own breathing, however, remained perfectly steady. Aegis, for his part, couldn't believe he hadn't managed to corner Zeke. Even after pushing him this far, "You're truly incredible," he admitted openly, then asked in a softer tone, "What kind of training could possibly create a fighter like you?" Zeke's reply was bright and easy. "If you're that curious, maybe we can spar together sometime after this is all settled." He didn't even finish the sentence before he launched himself forward. The space between them vanished in a heartbeat. Zeke pulled his fist back and then unleashed it toward Aegis with explosive force. Aegis caught the blow on the flat of his katana, but a harsh jolt shot right up his arm. His grip trembled from the raw, unyielding pressure behind the strike. Where is all that strength coming from? Aegis wondered. That kind of impact was nothing like a typical two-star combatant. Zeke shifted his stance slightly, reviewing their exchange in his mind. He noted aloud that he'd deliberately altered his breathing, yet Aegis had still adapted instantly. Based on his observations, Zeke conceded that Aegis was far more talented than he had first assumed. Aegis heard him and responded with unnerving calm. "Does that mean your little analysis is over, seeing as you've started to fight back?" "To a point, yes," Zeke replied, and Aegis's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you implying you've completely figured out my style already?" Without waiting for an answer, Aegis suddenly vaulted high into the air. His presence sharpened as he raised his blade, declaring, "If you think so, then I'll just have to show you more." Seeing the familiar movement, Zeke remarked, "That pattern looks just like the one from before." He sidestepped with fluid grace, effortlessly evading the descending slash. But Aegis wasn't finished. In that same instant, his energy flared as he activated his residual image technique. A phantom after image lingered for a moment, masking the true trajectory of his blade. Before Zeke could fully register the deception, a sharp impact connected squarely with his chest. Zeke's eyes widened as the blow sent him staggering backward. The soles of his feet scraped against the arena floor as he fought to keep his balance. Aegis's expression changed almost imperceptibly as he spoke again, his voice cool. "So, tell me, was that enough to meet your expectations, or do I need to reveal even more?" Zeke glanced down at the fresh mark across his chest. "Wow," he admitted with a grin, "you actually managed to land a hit." A bright, genuine smile lit up his face, his voice humming with an unmistakable thrill. "All right," Zeke added, his eyes sparkling. "Now this is finally getting fun." Anyone watching would have felt the same. This was no longer just a test. It was something more,